This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney. A start to a good week. When's Memorial Day? It's not this week. It's next week.
It's this week, my
It's
friend.
this week?
Yes. The
Are we
weather
off
looks
Friday?
solid. We are off Friday. We are off Friday.
We're off Friday.
Thursday might even be
Can you
debatable for
Wait,
me.
who is? We are?
I
We're
am.
off Monday.
No, I'm
We're
off
Monday.
Friday, Rich.
It's a well-oiled
Rich is trying to correct me.
He's off, not
I'm
us.
off.
Okay, you're off Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa,
It's
are
in
you
the
off
contract.
Monday?
Yeah, we're all off Monday. We're
Okay,
all off
good.
Monday.
We're starting a little chaotic here this morning. Of course, we're looking at a bull market futures, 40,164, SPX 5335. Good morning to all of you on Apple CarPlay, on Android, on YouTube. I'm learning about YouTube every day. All weekend I was studying it, YouTube, and YouTube TV's different, and YouTube music and that. And Paul, all I can see is a backdrop here into Friday. Is anybody actually talking about this great bull market? I don't see it.
It doesn't feel like it. I mean, there's that wall of worry out there. But I think what's been moving, this latest move here, when we talk to the strategists we have on here, Tom, it's not just the Fed's going to be easing at some point, but we've actually had some pretty solid earnings coming out of this quarter here. And of course, a big earnings moment is going to take place Wednesday after the close. We're going to get NVIDIA, Tom. So that's the company that kind of started this whole AI thing last year.
So if
for
they
the market.
stumble, we go into a bear market? Is
I
that
don't
the
know.
simplistic view?
The bar is very high, I would suspect, for these guys. The
We'll
stock
have to
continues
see.
to rally.
We say good morning. What's amazing, everybody's got this plague across the country. I was on the phone to family, and there's a lot of this, what I had going on, and people are getting better. But Michael Barr's here. Paul Sweeney's here.
Yep.
I'm here. We're in the Interactive Broker studio now, trying to do a better data check than Karen Moscow. She went down in flames about 7 minutes ago. Lisa Mateo, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we try our very best. We have a little bit of a lift to the markets this morning before the bell after the Dow reached a milestone on Friday, closing above 40,000 for the first time ever. Checking with Dow futures, little change, but at 40,163. We'll head over to NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 18,680, and S&P futures up about 0.1%. To the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.82%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.41%, and that is little changed as well. To commodities, gold surging. We have spot gold higher at $2,434 an ounce. Copper rose to its highest level on bets that a shortage is coming. And then over to oil, we have Brent crude at $83 a barrel, WTI crude $79 a barrel. To earnings we go. We'll head over to JP Morgan, up 0.7%, boosted its net interest income for the forecast for the full year, also raised its expense guidance for the year. And news from AstraZeneca, the company investing $1.5 billion in a manufacturing site in Singapore that's dedicated to the production of an advanced form of chemotherapy. ADRs, right now they're down about 0.2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning. Out on YouTube, thrilled with the international reach that we have with YouTube. You go out, you search Bloomberg Podcasts, and you subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. And it gets you over to YouTube, where we've got the entire show up. It's a new digital experiment for us.
Nice.
Good morning, Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh,
Have
that's
you been there?
nice. I have. Boy, that is
the whole
beautiful.
Rainbow Row and the Battery, the old houses.
The whole low country down there is just spectacular lifestyle down there. With the water everywhere you look. It's like Maine, and everywhere you look, there's water. Only there it's warm.
Yeah, it's warm. It's not. They don't have lobster. I mean, the lobster's
they have
not like
lobster.
that.
They have alligators. But,
Good morning to the College of the Charleston.
Yes,
and
very
everybody
nice.
down there. Oh, equal time. Patty's in Savannah. This is like a typical hate thing. Savannah, Charleston as well. Paul, I got to go to Paramount Update. I read carefully Lucas Shaw. Thank you, Lucas, for joining us last week with All on Hollywood. Is this the week for Paramount, for Ms. Redstone to finally figure it out?
Very well could be, Tom. I mean, there's really no, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like there's credible bidders out there. But Sony and Apollo signed non-disclosure agreements with Paramount. That's according to the New York Times. So they're circling here. They got to get something done. You have your control shareholder, Sherry Redstone. She wants to get something done. So at some point, this thing's going to trade hands.
Joining us right now, Damian Sassower on the back story of the morning. You're looking at this great bull market. Damian's not in equities. It's like against his faith.
I can talk equities, sure.
He's in yen, and the yen is really something this morning. The first thing I looked at coming in, euro yen could reach out to a weak yen 170. We're at 169 right now. Those yields go up. Does the bond market speak in Japan, Damian Sassower, like the bond market speaks in America?
You know, it's funny you mentioned Japan. You know, on the way in this morning, I was listening to the JP Morgan's At Any Rate podcast, and Ayoko-san was talking about, you know, does anyone really care what Japan is doing right now? I mean, look, I don't believe so, amazing as it sounds. I mean, I think at $155 yen, I think that was the last, you know, print that I saw. You know, the risk of upside there is de minimis because, you know, the BOJ is expected to intervene whenever we kind of break above 160. Right. So euro yen's a bit of a different animal. And I think where Europe's trading on right now, quite frankly, are commodities. If you look at metals prices, I mean, you've got European equity indices rallying off the back of that. I think the South African equity index is at an all-time high off the back of copper and gold prices at a cycle high. So I think that's what's driving the euro part of the cross rate, if you're talking euro yen. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's really what's happening there.
Within this is the relationship to the Pacific Rim, much more what Damian Sassower does.
Indonesia, South Korea.
I mean, how do they deal with an exceptional United States economy, a central bank in the United States that has to worry about America? How do they bounce off that?
On tenterhooks, Tom. On tenterhooks. I mean, again, you've seen the Bank of Indonesia actually hiking rates. So they hiked by 25 bips at the last meeting. They're meeting on Wednesday or Thursday, rather. I mean, the verdict is out, but I imagine they will be hawkish. And Korea as well. You know, they have been looking to cut because, you know, that economy needs some stimulus badly. But, you know, you've got Samsung kind of leading EM equity indices to new highs. And quite frankly, they're not going to cut either. I mean, so I think a lot of these Asian central banks who have yields that are, you know, structurally lower than that we see here in the U.S., I think they're basically going to have to, you know, remain hawkish, kind of, you know, edge to the upside. So I think that's the broader Asia bloc. But, you know, I mean, today, I mean, just going back to what we're talking about with gold prices, I mean, with what's going on in the Middle East, with MBS, you know, postponing his trip to Japan, with Iran, with, you know, secession, you know, being called into question as to, you know, the Ayatollah and what happens next there. I think there's a geopolitical undertone to what we're seeing here in terms of the price action on a Monday morning, for sure.
So So I'm going to come back to my favorite emerging market. I'm Mexico. I'm all in. So, I mean, why don't I just stay home and stick with Mexico and our good friends in Central and South America?
Well, I mean, Mexico has definitely been sort of the proxy for playing, you know, U.S. dollar strength within the emerging market complex. So you're right to point that out, Paul. And I think that's not going to change. You know, I don't want to call it a dumping ground for what's going. I mean, look, let's take a step back. What are we seeing here in the U.S.? What's it going to take, Tom, for the Fed to actually cut rates, which is what the market's pricing in? Well, I mean, it's one of two things. You're going to have to see growth in the U.S. be revised lower. That's just going to have to happen. It's not going to be an inflation story anymore. You got to see growth come in, or you're going to need to see something break. And, you know, I don't think any, you know, risk manager or portfolio manager is going to be betting on something breaking here in the U.S., given what we've seen.
I think the confusion of our listeners and our viewers is we've hit this Dow 40,000 closing at 40,003. Spreads are priced perfectly.
Yeah.
Like in our careers,
tight.
The market, what is the market saying? Was spreads perfect in the market at 3:32 p.m. doing a moonshot?
Well, spreads are definitely a function of what's going on inside the corporate credit market and the cost of funding there. And so I just had an interesting conversation. You have to get them on here, Tom and Paul. Joel Levington, the head of credit for BI, talking about they have their big auto conference, Autopalooza, coming up in 2 weeks here at 120 Park. And, you know, what he was talking about is the cost of financing. I mean, the residual. So think about it this way. In 2021, everybody went out and bought a Tesla for $65,000. Well, that Tesla now, that Tesla's reduced its prices, the residual on that is, what, $10,000 less, you know? And that hasn't caught up to the consumer yet, right? Now we're 2 to 3 years out. Once these people start trading their cars in, et cetera, the residual is just not there. So there's going to be, how are they going to buy the new Tesla, which is, so there's a lot there that he's talking about, and the banks are not lending to people for auto leases anymore because of this, right? So Experian, for example. So this is kind of what we're seeing in funding. And I think, look, they're willing to lend to Microsoft and Apple and the big corporates at low spreads, but they're not willing to loan to the household.
Damian Sassower, don't move. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Iran's supreme leader has announced 5 days of mourning for President Ibrahim Raisi This after Raisi was killed in a helicopter crash in a mountainous region in the northwest part of the country. Bloomberg's Sylvia Westall.
Raisi was seen by many analysts as one of the possible successors to the Supreme Leader himself. He was a cleric, he had this judicial background. So now, with the Supreme Leader in his 80s, there is the question about who will actually succeed him as well in that top authority role. So there is an open question about who will become president after elections, but also longer term, who will succeed the Supreme Leader as the overall leader of Iran.
Bloomberg's Sylvia Westall. Also killed among the 9 on board, Iran's foreign minister. President Biden made an appeal to black voters in a commencement address at historic Morehouse College in Atlanta and defending his administration's actions in the Gaza war. The president speaking directly to students for the first time since protests have flared on campuses across the country.
It's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That's why I've called for an immediate ceasefire. An immediate ceasefire to stop the fighting. Bring the hostages home.
Students silently protesting the president's handling of the war in Gaza, turning their chairs away from Biden, and a faculty member standing with her fist raised. Former President Donald Trump's hush money trial is heading into the final stretch, with the prosecution's last and star witness expected back on the stand for more grilling. The trial will resume today in Manhattan with more defense cross-examination of former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. In golf, Xander Schauffele has won his first major, winning the PGA Championship at Valhalla. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Joining us, surveillance tea time correspondent Damian Sassar. Help me here.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is. I don't know the guy he beat. All I know is Miller Barber and a guy named Palmer and Nicholas and Tiger Woods. Is it a faceless PGA now?
No. The leaderboard, Schauffele, are you kidding? These were real people at the top yesterday. I mean, it was fun to watch. I mean, Scheffler, we all know what happened with Scotty Scheffler. I mean, he is now a legend in the world of golf. But I think what you really want to know is, how did the Governor Cup qualifier do at Tamarack this weekend? And I'm happy to report that Eric Oberman and I not only qualified, but we won our first match.
Really?
So we get another 4 weeks to play the next person. So, we survived.
Wow.
We survived a big weekend.
Tom and I might make a little road trip up to see your next match.
Hobie, if you're listening, you were bombing it. You are the man, dude. What a great showing.
At least so we can get Jim Nance to come in. Working the 15th hole there as well. What's your strategy when you're out there on a par 3?
I'll tell you, the strategy is to get off in time for the Knicks at 3:30. That was the whole strategy yesterday. We barely made it in time, but hey, look, that was a tough shot.
And then the other team goes out and shoots like 70%.
Yeah.
The Pacers were on fuego.
We had nobody left.
Literally, they're pulling guys out of the stands.
I'm almost happy that they lost. They need a break.
Michael Barr, Bloomberg Business and Sports, you and Damian and Scarlet Fu, you got a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, we do. Lando Norris and Piastri, did you see them over the weekend? McLaren is now real. So we have F1 there. We have the Rangers, for you Ranger fans out there. There's something to watch there. Yankees are back in first place. Great morning to be alive here.
You mentioned the dreaded Yankees.
See ya. 7 in a row. Unbelievable.
They're playing the White Sox.
And the Knicks, but anyway.
Can I just say, Zach Brown, who runs McLaren, is great because he actually shows emotion. The rest of them are like,
he's a California kid.
I'm cool.
Not like these Europeans.
Damian, thank you for getting us started so strong here in the 7 o'clock hour. Michael Barr will return as well. Futures up 6, Dow futures up 13. The VIX threatening an 11 handle. Good morning.
Now look at some.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, stocks edging a bit higher this morning. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%. Dow futures little change at 40,150. And we have S&P futures up about 0.1%. Over to the bond market, we have the 2-year yield at 4.82%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that is little changed as well. The economic calendar pretty quiet today. Later this week, the Federal Reserve reports on minutes of its April-May policy meeting. As far as earnings, we told you about JP Morgan after the bell at Zoom video, but all eyes zero in Wednesday when NVIDIA reports. Barclays increased its price target on the stock. Shares right now up about 1%. And moving the markets, Johnson Controls International, they're up 6%. The reason why? Well, Bloomberg reporting that Elliott Investment Management has built up a large position in the company. And Google making a move to zero in on Microsoft's customers. Bloomberg reporting the company released a white paper highlighting its rival security lapses. It's also offering government corporate clients discounts to ditch Office for its software. Alphabet right now up 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene here. On the equity markets, we'll get to it here. Lots to talk about. Let me give you those futures levels right now. 5333 on SPX. Dow future level 40,148. NASDAQ not near 19,000, 18,672. We're taking an eclectic approach today on equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. On currency now, James Lord joins, Global Head of FX EM Strategy at Morgan Stanley. James, you got to rewrite to get to June 30th. You're going to do a mid-year review. Where is the big figure play in foreign exchange? If it's a blur, if it's complex, there's macro this, macro that, where is a place where I can actually speculate and make money on a currency pair?
Hey, Tom, thanks very much for having me back on the show. I mean, our currency forecasts generally see a bit of dollar strength coming through, but probably the biggest movers that we're forecasting are things like being short euro versus long commodity currencies and long risk currencies. I mean, the overall dollar environment that we're expecting to see is one of modest strength, but you kind of get a really split dollar where the dollar's kind of outperforming versus some of the low yielders, so things like Swiss franc and European, the euro, but really underperforming against some of the risk currencies like Aussie dollar, South African rand, Turkish lira. I mean, these kind of currencies are the more risky ones. High yielders is where we expect to see the bigger moves.
I mean, Paul, I know you were like, you look at the vector of Euro Chilean peso,
sure, I'm all
which
over
you
that.
can do on the Bloomberg.
I know.
EURCLP. I mean, James Lord has got a tattoo on his left arm. And the answer is you've had a nice move, strong Chilean peso.
Who didn't have that beginning of the year? So let's, James, let's just talk about the yen. That's been in the news here. We're pushing up close to 156 here, 155.73. What's going on with the yen? How do you think this is going to play out? What's the Bank of Japan going to be doing here?
Yeah, I mean, we think dollar yen's really driven by U.S. rates. I mean, clearly, what happens with the BOJ is important. But if you look at it sort of statistically, like most of the majority of the move in dollar yen is explained by how the dollar rates behave, and it's partly just simply because of the fact that they're clearly much more volatile at such a higher level of yield. And we're forecasting U.S. rates to come down. I mean, right. Matt Hornback, Gunit Dhingra, and team have U.S. 10-year back down at 4.1% at the end of the year, on the back of 3 rate cuts from the Fed, and that should support a lower dollar yen. So, I mean, it's difficult to buy it just because of the negative carry, but we see dollar yen going back down to around 140 by the end of the year, which is, I mean, it's a little bit more than what the forwards are suggesting, but it's not really a great trade considering the carry you have to pay.
So, given your interest rate outlook for the U.S. Federal Reserve, I mean, I just can't think of a dollar bear case. I haven't been able to think of one for a long time.
Like about 10 years?
Exactly. So, I mean, does the dollar maybe drift a little bit lower just on this rate environment?
Yeah, I mean, so if you take our U.S. rate forecast, all else being equal, then it should suggest that the dollar comes down a bit. But the problem with that is that when we look at the yield differentials of the dollar versus on a DXY basis, that we're expecting to see bond yields fall by even more than what we're expecting to see Treasury yields fall. So, if the U.S. inflation comes down, it gives the Fed a bit more space to cut, then you're going to see markets price in even bigger easing cycles from the rest of the world. And, we think the ECB is part of that. So actually yield differentials will move, we think, in the dollar's favor. We still have U.S. growth outperforming the rest of the world, U.S. stocks doing very well. There's a lot to like about the U.S. dollar.
I mean, and your latest report, I mean, they've got enough people in this report.
I know,
it's like
and they got pictures, too.
It's like the sideline of the New York Giants.
Exactly.
And, it's like amazing. I mean, all of a sudden, you haven't talked to Amy Gower in like 10 years. All of a sudden, you're talking to one of your commodity strategists. What are people like Amy Gower telling you? How are they assisting you in speculation and investment forward, the commodity world? How do you bounce off that right now, James Lord?
Yeah, well, Amy's been very bullish on copper. She's had a great call on that.
Great call.
And it's clearly helping. You referenced Euro Chile. What that would have been a great trade. We think that is still a great trade. I mean, it's not. I would say copper prices are not feeding through completely into currency markets these days. Partly because this is a large part of this is a supply story. You've had mine closures, a lot of difficulty getting copper out the ground, and that's really boosted the price. But it doesn't have the same impact on metal on currencies that really depend on the revenue of that, because the volumes are going down, and it's not necessarily an indicator of global growth if the price is going up because of supply reasons. So generally, you see that across all commodities. Actually, if the price is changing because of supply, it doesn't have the same impact on commodity currencies as you would typically expect.
But James, this is important. The heritage of Morgan Stanley on commodities goes back to Ruchir Sharma, now at Rockefeller. Is Morgan Stanley saying there's a legit commodity cycle now? Or is it a set of one-offs that put orange juice to the moon?
No, I mean, we like metals. I mean, copper and other industrial metals are part of it. Gold prices as well. I mean, we do see some more upside in those names. Not a ton in energy and oil, but I mean, I think it's more interesting to look at it on the metal space, given the energy transition and some of the supply constraints that you're seeing there. And some of that feeds through into gold in terms of how the fiscal is evolving in the US. There's always concerns about that. And if the dollar goes down, then typically you would see some gold price. If US rates come down, then typically you would see gold prices being supported. So I wouldn't say it's like across the board in commodities, but yeah, a little bit more selective and biased towards metals.
James, in the emerging markets here, we just had Damien Sassower on from Bloomberg Intelligence giving us his thoughts here. Yeah, where do you see the opportunities here, James? I mean, there's just so many cross currents here.
Yeah, I mean, we like Turkish lira, right? I mean, in this time zone, we think Turkish lira is a good story. I mean, it's difficult to having been through many cycles of the Turkish lira over the past 10 years. No cycles have typically been bearish. It's quite hard to sort of push along Turkish lira view with a lot of conviction, but we do see that we do believe that the changes that are ongoing in that country in terms of policy are going to be sustained for some time. So we think Turkish lira will outperform the forwards. You can pick up some carry. We think that's an improving story.
James, we got to leave it there just because of time. James Lord, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it with Morgan Stanley this morning driving all of their foreign exchange. Sort of a blur there how it folds into equities. I mean, how do you link dollar to NVIDIA? And yet it's all one big stew, and we try to give it to you in equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. I went shopping this week. I never go out.
Well, I know somebody was shopping here.
But I went out and I didn't realize Tiffany's was selling like steaks and beef.
What?
I mean, I'm kidding. Live cattle, Paul, off the bottom of the pandemic,
pork bellies,
is up 116%. That's called a double.
Yeah, I guess we've heard what I've heard is the herd has been thinned. I don't know what. Yes, I did go to Walmart, and it was an experience, and we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, but save it for it's 8 o'clock talk.
Exactly.
Well, I had a barbecue. I bought 4 burgers for $16.
4 burgers for $16.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a gourmet meat store thing.
Oh, you went to our
I went
poison. Yeah, okay,
down
to
to
Providence.
Barnes, but
Okay.
Still, I was floored.
It's the finest cows anywhere.
Did you get invited?
I did not get the invite.
Futures up 8. Stay with us on YouTube. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bloomberg Surveillance is brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are advanced. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 18,682. Dow futures, they're a little change at 40,161. And S&P futures up 0.1% at 5,336. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.82%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that is little changed. Over to currencies, the dollar stronger, Japanese yen, euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up about 1.5% at 67,204. And some tough news from Europe's largest low-cost carrier. We're talking about Ryanair. The company said airfares over the peak summer season, they'll be lower than expected, and that led Citi to cut its pricing expectations. ADRs are little changed. Airbus, their ADRs up 0.5%. It secured an order for 105 narrow-body jets from Saudi Arabia's flagship carrier. Meanwhile, Boeing, well, they may be taking another hit. The FAA proposing a new airworthiness directive for some of its jets. Their shares down about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Thanks out on YouTube. We got a live chat going out on YouTube, and I learned a lot off of it. Somebody said nice things about James Lord at Morgan Stanley. George Saravelos coming up at Deutsche Bank, as well as we really try to frame up here, getting through May. I know it's the summer. Are we supposed to have a hot summer? I think so. I think so. Like the meteorologists talk about it. Getting through that with a hot economy. All weekend, Paul, I'm studying this, and I'm amazed at the lack of exuberance in the bull market. And to me, I bring it back to where Raphael Bostic is, studying the animal spirit of America. There's GDP plus inflation equals nominal GDP or current GDP. And the great misstep has been underestimating that oomph of the American economy.
Absolutely, Tom. I think you're right here. I think coming into the year, certainly over the last 12 months, I think the market's been kind of underestimating the GDP, productivity.
Part of that.
Yep. Yeah. And the strength of the consumer here. So you kind of put that all together, and it's been a pretty solid economy. Yes, inflation is not coming down. Maybe that last leg down has been a little bit slower than a lot of folks would like, including the Fed, including the market. Because remember, we came into 2024, Tom, the market was looking for maybe 6 Fed rate cuts, and now we're down to maybe 2.
Raphael Bostic in conversation with our Michael McKee. Let's listen to Mr. McKee and the gentleman from
radio and television worldwide. We are at Amelia Island in Florida for the Financial Markets Conference of the Atlanta Fed, and the host has graciously agreed to join us this early morning. Thank you for being with us. I'm not going to ask you when you're going to cut rates, because nothing's probably changed in your view that it's not time yet, you need more confidence, and you've been the one saying maybe one later this year. That's the same, right?
Nothing has changed. But first of all, good morning. It's good to see you, and welcome to the conference. It's good to have you here. No, what you said is exactly right. The numbers have come in for the first part of this year, very bumpy, and it really suggests that inflation is going to come down far slower than I think many had expected. And so rather than focus on numbers of cuts and all that kind of stuff, really the issue right now is, when are we going to be certain that inflation is clearly on its path to 2%? I think it's going to take a while before we'll know that for sure.
Well, what is it that tells you that maybe you'll only get one or you might get no cuts this year? What do you see in the economy?
Well, we do a lot of talking to business leaders, and what they're all telling us is things are slowing down, but they're slowing down very slowly and coming off of pretty high record levels of profits and revenue. So in that instance, there's going to be continued momentum in the economy, and that momentum is just going to take a while to play through. The other thing everyone tells us, though, is that pricing power is weakening. They do know that the expansion and large growth is not in their outlooks and on the table. And so for me, that says, yeah, it's going to slow down, it's going to get there, but it's only going to be eventual.
Is it likely that inflation doesn't go down, or that it could go up again?
Well, as you know, anything can happen. My outlook is really that inflation will continue to fall through this year and into 2025. I think that it will take quite a while for us to get all the way to 2%, but I do think we'll get there. But of course, the unexpected can always happen, and we've seen that through the last 3 or 4 years, where the pandemic was not expected, a war in Europe wasn't expected, and they do send ripples through the entire economy. If that happens, we'll just have to be ready and then respond as appropriate.
One of the themes of this conference is sort of what happens next. So what happens next? You're higher for longer now, and some think you're going to be higher forever, that we're not going back to low interest rates.
Well, I don't think we're going to go, well, let me say this. I hope we don't go back to zero interest rates, because that means something will have happened that requires us to go to maximum support for the economy, and that would not be ideal for anybody. I do think that our new steady state is likely to be higher than what people have known over the last decade, maybe back to where we were in the 1990s and 2000s, but we'll just have to see. But I do think a strong, important message people should have is going back to zero means that something bad happened in the economy, and we want to avoid that as much as possible.
Well, what do you say to people who want to move or people who want to buy a new car? Hold on, wait, or how long do these industries have that they can hold out until you decide what you're going to do next?
Well, I don't think anyone's waiting for us at this point on the business side. You see in the auto space that producers and auto dealers, they're adding incentives for people to buy their cars. You know, we talked to lots of major sellers of cars. They're trying to move volume. They are trying to do those things, and I think for consumers, it's really shop around. It's like back to where we used to be and how the economy used to work. You got to go find where there are opportunities. They're out there, but you know, people just need to live their lives. And what I'm finding and seeing is most of them are doing that. The housing and home ownership, that's a special case, and people are locked into those. But even there, because we have remote work, and we have people working in these hybrid situations, there are opportunities for people to continue to stay engaged in the economy.
Well, a lot of people look at the housing industry, for example, and other areas that have started to slow down. And there's an argument that maybe you're going to be behind the curve in cutting rates.
I don't think that that's really the right way to think about it. For me, our mandate is stable prices and maximum employment. On the employment side, we're still seeing many, many jobs being created. On the inflation side and the stable prices, we've still got a ways to go. And so for us, and I think given our mandates, we need to get that stable pricing side to where we need it to be, because at that point, then the economy will be positioned to stand on its own, to move forward, and to create growth and prosperity.
When you get asked when you're going to cut rates, and you give the answer that you give, and your colleagues get asked and give the answer that they give, you've said as a group that we're not doing forward guidance anymore. But is this a forward guidance that you're doing anyway, because it does seem like you're guiding the markets, or at least the markets are reacting to everything you say?
Well, I think the markets have always reacted to everything we say, so I don't think this is new. What I would say, though, is we are open to all possibilities. And from here moving forward, there are scenarios where the economy is going to expand and accelerate. There are scenarios where the economy might slow down faster than expected. And then there is my outlook scenario, which is slow and steady wins the race. In all of those cases, there are policy prescriptions, and we have to be ready for all of them. So in this sense, unlike in the pandemic or even the great financial crisis, when we knew that most of the risk was on one side, now the risks are really balanced, and so there isn't sort of a bias in one direction or another. I think that's the message to be taken. If you want to call that forward guidance, that's fine. I mean, to me, I think in many regards, that's life. Like, life is, you don't know, something good could happen, something bad could happen, and you just have to be ready for it.
Well, you've got another month, essentially, before you have your next meeting, and you have to put out your forecasts. But you want to give us a sneak preview of what you think growth and inflation are going to be like for the rest of the year?
Well, I've been told many times, don't scoop yourself. So I don't know. You know, the way our process works is, as we get closer to the meeting, I meet with my team. We really try to get a sense of where everybody is on this. You know, I have a bunch of great economists in our building who have their own views and opinions about how the economy is going to move forward. I take that on board, and we'll get to a narrative at that point. But right now, I'm just worried about this conference, making sure it goes off as well as it can. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
You're going to be just one dot by yourself on the dot plot when it comes out?
Well, we'll see about that.
When you look at the economy overall, does it surprise you still that we're seeing the strength in the labor markets that we are seeing? Are you hearing anything from CEOs about that turning?
So what I've heard from business leaders really is that today, labor markets are weaker than they were, softer than they were 12 months ago, but they're not soft. You know, this is a question that we ask all the time because we need to know how the labor side of input to production is doing. But I think it's really important when we think about workers and the labor market is that before the pandemic, the labor markets were tight. Right? So I don't think we're likely to evolve to a place where labor there's going to be many people out there available for work. We're going to go back to where we were. I will say, there have been lots of reports that show that immigration has been an important contributor, and we'll see how it evolves moving forward.
Well, the big question that a lot of people on Wall Street, and I guess in a way Main Street, are asking is monetary policy restrictive now? And is what you're restricting the problems in the for inflation, or is it maybe stuff you can't do anything about? Well,
look, I think that our stance is restrictive. Another thing we do, we have surveys, and I ask people all the time, do you think that our policy stance is preventing some things from happening that you would do otherwise? Every business leader says yes. Now, some of them say, it's changed my forecast over the next 12 months. I have some cash, so I can actually buy some things and don't need to use debt instruments for that. But everyone acknowledges to me that our policy rate is slowing things down. It is tightening. And that's what really gives me the confidence that we can get inflation back to our 2% target.
Well, as a last question, we're obviously in a season where everybody's getting asked their feelings about the economy. Do you think we see any significant changes in the economy over the next 6 months, say?
It's hard to say. My outlook is the economy is going to continue to be growing. Inflation is going to continue to come down slowly. The economy will continue to create jobs. And the United States economy will continue to be the leading economy in the world.
But will people feel that?
You'll have to ask them. So I think one of the things I've heard is we don't have just one economy today. We have people that are on the lower end of the income and wealth distribution. They have gone through their excess savings. They are feeling somewhat the same way they were before the pandemic. Then you have a lot of other folks who accrued a lot of savings through the pandemic because they couldn't go on vacations, they couldn't go to restaurants. They're still in a spend mode. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do today is figure out how that all fits together to give a picture of how the aggregate economy is going to move forward. Today, what I'm hearing is that there's still enough spend on that upper end that the economy can continue to grow, but it is slowing down.
Well, we will check in with you in a couple of months and see if anything's changed. Raphael Bostic, thank you very much for joining us.
Michael McKee with Raphael Bostic, one of my favorite people in this nation, only in America, Paul. Delran, New Jersey, valedictorian of his class, wanders up to the shores of the Charles River in Boston and gets it done in economics. And he's now at Atlanta holding court. His comments there at the end we'll talk about. That's anybody that follows the show knows I really believe in a disaggregated America, as Raphael Bostic said there to Michael McKee. On this Monday morning, after that Friday surge, equities lift, futures up 9, Dow futures up 26, the VIX 12.18. From New York City on YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, please stay with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are advancing after Friday's surge. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 18,682. Dow futures little change, but at 40,166. And S&P futures at the 5,336 level, up about 0.1%. The bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.82%, little change. The 10-year yield at 4.41%, and that is little changed as well. A few companies making news. We'll start with Red Lobster. It actually filed for bankruptcy and working on a plan to sell its seafood restaurants to a group of lenders. Those cheese biscuits, though, restaurants will stay open in the meantime. A few car makers in focus this morning. The New York Times reporting congressional investigation found BMW, Jaguar Land Rover, Volkswagen, they purchased parts that originated from a Chinese supplier that was flagged by the U.S. for taking part in forced labor programs. And finally, if you're waiting for that fully electric Lamborghini, well, you're going to have to wait a little while longer. The Landor crossover, its first full EV model, set to arrive in 2028. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Matthew Miller, Hot Pursuits. Look for that. It's got some huge reviews as being smart and auto and all that.
Yeah, he does that with Hannah Elliott, who I love following on social media because she is all over the globe sitting and driving these phenomenal vehicles everywhere around the globe.
Why don't we have her job?
I know, exactly.
I don't get it. Right now, we're going to talk about this without any names because we just, we're not, I mean, we all have our history, and I have been wrong, folks. Trust me. There's also things you can whisper in my ear when I'm obnoxious. How does strategists shift, Paul, on Wall Street when they're wrong?
Yeah, it's tough, and we saw Mike Wilson.
Are they told to shift?
Well, they're told by their sales force. The sales force will come right up to them and say, listen, I can't make your call to my clients anymore. They don't want to hear it. You got to rethink this thing. You're wrong. So, I've seen it where the salespeople can come right up to you and say, listen, my clients aren't buying your call. You got to rethink it. That happens a lot. What does not happen is management comes up and tells you, hey, you're hurting our business. Our retail brokers
does not happen.
I have not seen it, but
like a general counsel doesn't call you up on a Sunday afternoon and say we got a problem.
No, but I mean, I think they hear it from the people out in the trenches. The retail and the institutional salespeople that have to make these sales calls every day, and you're giving me a call that's just been wrong.
I agree. Sometimes the salespeople say keep him, keep him, keep him. Good morning up in Toronto.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages. She was looking at them through halftime of the Knicks yesterday. These pages around the world, brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Discover the future of trading with their next generation trading platform, IBKR Desktop. IBKR Desktop. Download IBKR Desktop at ibkr.com/desktop. Thank you, IBKR, for your commitment to what we do here in economics, finance, investment, and the daily newspapers. Lisa Mateo, what do you have?
All right, we're starting with the sports kind of center thing since we were talking about the Knicks. Why not, okay? Axios is actually reporting Amazon nearing a deal that would make its streaming service Prime one of the partners of the NBA, one of 3 partners of the NBA. So it's going to add a mix of regular season, playoff games to Prime. I mean, Amazon's been pushing, though, this sports streaming, The NFL's Thursday Night Football. They extended a deal with the WNBA for 2 more seasons. NASCAR races coming, too.
I'm so glad you brought this up because, Paul, I thought of you this weekend. It's not going to be like a gradual thing. The streamers are just going to say now.
When these deals come up for renewal, Tom, I think the expectation is on all sides that these big tech companies, the streamers, will be there. Thursday night Yankee games for the past couple seasons have been on there, and the old Yankee fans up in the Bronx, they're calling up sports talk radio saying, "How do I get the game tonight?"
Yeah.
I mean, and also I believe I may have this wrong, but Netflix Christmas Day Football, 75 million, I think, per game.
I think so.
That's almost more than Taylor Swift makes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's because that's where the viewership is going, the cord cutting and all that. you don't get the bang for your buck with your broadcast and cable networks.
Next, Lisa. What do you got?
Crazy. So Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin flight over the weekend flew, but you know you always get those like side stories out from each flight. So this one I thought was interesting off of it. It went off Sunday. Ed Dwight, he was America's first black astronaut candidate. On Sunday, he finally rocketed into space. 60 years later, the age of 90, he was on that flight. So the backstory is he was an Air Force pilot when President John F. Kennedy kind of pushed him to be a candidate for NASA's early astronaut corps, but he wasn't picked for that 1963 class. NASA actually didn't select black astronauts until 1978. So he went on this flight. He called it a life-changing experience. Now he is actually a record holder, the oldest person in space by 2 months from William Shatner.
William Shatner.
Yes.
Captain Kirk.
He is 2 months older than William Shatner when he went back in 2021. So I love those like side stories from the launches that you
Very
get from
cool.
that.
Very
Yes,
cool.
very, very interesting. I like that one.
What else?
Sure. People working from home. So they're starting to take advantage of shopping online. You know, the boss isn't looking over your shoulder. You can kind of get a couple things done. So the research says the pandemic, sparked the rise in online shopping, but it's continued. Last year, we spent $375 billion more than we would have otherwise. So how do they know it's coming from hybrid workers? Well, they said areas where work from home jobs are more popular, that's where the shopping went up. And then areas where people are kind of back going to the office, that's where the levels went down a bit.
Where are people going back to the office? Where are these areas?
Nick Bloom, somebody had this, Diane Swank had this out this weekend. She does great work. Diane Swank, follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter, had Nick Bloom of Stanford, which says traditional firms, they're coming back.
Okay.
And the newer formation firms are embedded with work from home.
Okay.
That was the basic thrust of what Diane Swank was alluding to. I have to
What
be
are we?
careful. I have to be careful. What we are is I have the surveillance cork in my mouth because I'm very opinionated on this, and nobody wants to hear it. But so we're working from home, ordering on Amazon.
Yes.
That's the thing.
And that's the thing. There's the people who work from home. They spoke to the Wall Street Journal. They're saying that they do it because they're not in the people in the office get the coffee break. They get to chitty chat with other people. They don't have that. So this is their release. So they're not doing it all the time.
This is critical.
Yes.
The chitty chat is part of the fabric
the workplace culture
of corporate interplay, I would say. Can you get to the marginal great idea or even good idea without the chitty chat? I don't think you can. Paul, it's like, let's do Zoom with our institutional sales force. No, you get, Jamie Dimon said this in his annual letter, get on the plane and go.
Yep. I don't, I've thrown in the towel on this. We'll let the new generation do their thing. And I'm
tell
sure
me
it'll
what you
work out
think on
fine.
live chat on this. Get out on YouTube and tell us what you think from work from home. The middle child has told me it's a complete scam. She's lined up, and the people are working from 9 to 11:42, and that they do like 6 hours of work in an hour and a half, and no one's policing them.
Right.
I mean, that's just what the middle child says. I don't. You're gonna save us here? You got something next before I get the hook?
Last one. Okay, so you've seen them like the different flavor combinations like Peeps flavored Pepsi and pink lemonade flavored Kit Kats, like all these wild off the wall things. Well, yes, they're social media stunts, but experts are saying there's a little more thinking behind it. So the Wall Street Journal spoke with food companies, marketers. They said that the taste palette of the consumer is changing. They want more. They want a little bit of sour and sweet.
Sour Patch Kids Oreos?
Sour Patch Kids Oreos. I'm telling you. They want the best of both in one. Gen Z is also fueling that because they're a little bit more adventurous. They're on social media looking at these new flavor trends. But they're saying it helps the brands, right? So it helps bring in new customers. It helps show that they're fun and edgy, but it also helps nudge buyers to buy the original and the new flavor so they can test out which both. So now the customer is buying more. They're buying the original and the fancy new flavor.
Oddball pairings aren't entirely new in the food and beverage industry. Hubba Bubba released a bubblegum flavored soda in the late 1980s, for example. I remember that.
I talked to Mondelez this weekend. They called me up. They said, thanks for the efforts on Tang Zero. There's Tang and there's Tang Zero. There's no Hubba Bubba Tang.
But this is just on the margin. At the end of the day, consumer staples grow at GDP. I don't care how you package it, how you do all this kind of stuff.
And there's solid double-digit
But I'll tell you what I
returns.
do like. I do like the smaller serving sodas. like the
the tiny cans.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
tiny
I'm not into the 12 ounce anymore.
Yeah.
So that thing works out perfectly for me. So whoever was thinking of that, good job.
Share is 59 today. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The newspapers.
How old?
Today. Share is 59 today.
Ooh.
And, you know,
Like
you got to go to
70.
Believe. I mean, you got to play Believe. And what's so cool about Believe, there's a software package called Auto-Tune. And this is where Mark Taylor and company helped us learn Auto-Tune. I'm auto-tuned every day. Surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance on a Monday, setting up a week, yes, to get to NVIDIA, yes, to see a continued bull market. Futures up 8, the VIX threatening 11, 12.21, but also geopolitical tensions. James Lord of Morgan Stanley, Paul, in the last hour, made clear the geopolitics is germane, it's tangible this morning.
It's front and center. It's the Middle East. It's obviously Ukraine, and now with this news coming out of Iran, another layer to that as well.
We'll have to see on that. We're going to do much. We'll give an important interview coming up here in a moment because of our schedule. We're going to get right to it. This morning, we're on Apple CarPlay, on Android. You can get us in Dubai on Apple CarPlay, on Android, on YouTube, worldwide. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Search Bloomberg Podcasts. You'll find us out there with a live chat, to say the least. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, we're brought to you by Cohn-Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Let Cohn-Resnick's enterprise risk advisors help you build confidence in your supply chain using data analytics. Visit cohnresnick.com. A Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, and a bit of a lift to the markets before the bell after the Dow reached a milestone on Friday, closing above 40,000 for the first time ever. We'll get to NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 18,680. Dow futures, they're a little change at 40,161. S&P futures up 0.1%, 5,335. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.82%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year at 4.41%, and that is little change. To commodities, gold is surging. Spot gold higher at 2,427 an ounce, and copper rose to its highest level ever on bets that a shortage is coming. We head over to oil. Brent crude $83 a barrel. We have WTI crude $79 a barrel. To earnings, JP Morgan up nearly 1%. It boosted its net interest income forecast for the full year. And then after the bell, it's on to Zoom video communication, but all eyes zero in on Wednesday when NVIDIA reports. Barclays increased its price target on the stock. Shares up more than 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate that. Michael Barr giving us the news on the deaths in Iran in this terrible helicopter accident. Much will be said of this today, but we wanted to take a bigger, broader perspective for America, coast to coast. Good morning. And we can do that with Jumana Bersetsi joining us right now. Bloomberg Horizons, Middle East and Africa joining us from Dubai this morning. Jumana, I guess there can be a new path for Iran there. As a theocracy, will it be politics as usual and domestic politics as usual in Iran, or can there be something new this morning?
I think that is the big question. Let me just start off by saying that even before there was confirmation from Iranian state TV this morning that the President Raisi had been killed in this helicopter crash, the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was out with a statement yesterday evening saying, please pray for the well-being of all those on board the helicopter, but just so you know, and this is a quote, there will be no disruption in this country's affairs. The signaling from the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, is that even though this was a tragic incident for them, as far as they're concerned, from the path here onwards, nothing is going to be too disruptive. There isn't going to be a big change in policy. And I think what people need to be reminded of is that, yes, President Raisi did have a lot of power. He had executive power. He oversaw a lot of the domestic policy. But when it came to important things like external policy, foreign policy, national security considerations, that was all directed by the supreme leader, the Ayatollah. And even though now we have a temporary president put in place, there was the vice president, Mohammed Mokbar. He's taking over for up to the next 50 days. The next step is going to be the presidential elections. Also key there is that the Ayatollah is going to be overseeing it because there is a religious council that will vet all of the presidential candidates before they get to the elections.
Jumana, you've been on the watch here for years, and with Bloomberg Horizons, Middle East and Africa, the continuing story is a hope about moving Iran back to some form of complex capitalistic society. How far removed are we from that with this terrible accident, or frankly, before the accident? Have we given up hope that Iran can shift?
there's a great book I read, and I would recommend to viewers and listeners of this program to read as well. It's called Black Wave, written by Kim Ghattas, who is an erudite on the region. And she talks about how 1979 was a seminal year for the Middle East. It was also the year of the foundation of the Islamic Republic. And what we saw since then was the politicization of Islam. And that has continued up until now. And I would say just in the last couple of years, the pressure politically has moved even more to the right. President Raisi, be under no illusion here. He was one of the most hard-hitting far-right leaders of Iran that we've seen in the last couple of years. There's a reason that many in the public called him the butcher of Tehran. He imprisoned, he jailed many political prisoners in the 80s. He cracked down on protests in 2021 around the time of elections. He was the catalyst behind forcing many women to wear the hijab. So there is a lot of social discontent on the street now. And that is why for the regime to preserve themselves, they're going to be extra delicate about which candidates they allow into the race to become the next president. The hope is that somebody more reformist or more centrist will come in, but at the end of the day, it is still the supreme Ayatollah who's calling the shots.
Jumana, does this change potentially any policy towards the greater Middle East? I'm thinking what's happening with Israel and Gaza and so on.
So I would say, my immediate reaction to that would be, I think in the interim, they're going to be so focused on domestic politics that they're not really going to have time to engage in other wars. And I think, we spoke about the tit for tat direct retaliation, Iran, Israel, Iran, about a month ago. Nothing has escalated since then. So in the next 50 days, you've got to think that they're going to be focused on the presidential elections and what happens next. But then also, Iran and their presence in the region is via their sprawling axis of resistance. Key to that, of course, is Iran-backed proxies in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and more recently Hamas, of course. And what I would say is that the power there, the axis comes via the Revolutionary Guard. It wasn't coming through the president. So as long as IRGC are in the mix, those proxies still have the support from Iran.
Jumana, to shift to Riyadh, in the many times you have been to Riyadh, I believe it will be a changed Riyadh. The king is quite ill. He is 88 years old. Give us an update on the reporting of Bloomberg in Dubai and Riyadh on the wellness of King Salman.
He, as you say, he is getting old. This is his second incident in the last couple of weeks and his second trip to the hospital. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was supposed to be making a trip to Japan this morning. That was called off. We now know that King Salman is in a hospital, not in Riyadh, but he's actually in Jeddah undergoing more tests. The official reporting was that he had low blood pressure, he was slightly dehydrated, but they're closely monitoring the situation. And I think a big signal is the fact that the Crown Prince decided not to engage in any of these foreign policy trips at a time when his dad was so sick. The other thing that people forget about as well, and I think this is key in light of geopolitics, oil, we talk about that a lot on Bloomberg, is don't forget OPEC is coming up, and his other son is Abdulaziz bin Salman. He's the energy minister of Saudi Arabia. So you've got to think as well that there's an angle when it comes to the upcoming OPEC meeting about whether or not these energy ministers are actually going to end up meeting. The health of the king is obviously in the background there, and that will be a huge change within Saudi Arabia, because it should be the time when the Crown Prince officially gets designated king.
I've got 8 more questions, but no time. For Paul Sweeney, Jumana, thank you so much. Jumana Bersetchi with us, anchor of Bloomberg Horizons Middle East and Africa on these events this morning. Futures up 9, Dow futures up 32. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Hardline Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, along with the country's foreign minister, were killed in a helicopter crash. The wreckage was found on Sunday in a mountainous area of the country, but dense fog hampered rescue efforts. The government will now have to find a replacement for Raisi. Sanam Vakil is director of Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program.
The Iranian political establishment has tried to put forward a brave face, saying this is business as usual, but simultaneously they will be mourning the loss and preparing for transition. Iran's vice president will be stepping up. His name is Mohammad Mokhber. And in the meantime, constitutionally, the country is required to hold presidential elections within 50 days.
Chatham House's Sanam Vakil. In Ohio, a Hamilton County judge could rule today on the constitutionality of one of the nation's strictest abortion bans. Last November, Ohio voters chose to enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution. It prohibits an abortion ban after an ultrasound can detect a fetal heartbeat, which can be as early as 6 weeks before most women know they're pregnant. Loyola law professor and former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson.
This particular case is so important because it is likely to decide that when voters decide to put into a state constitution that there's a right to an abortion, old laws are now unconstitutional.
Former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson. The extradition of Julian Assange was delayed again after London judges gave the WikiLeaks founder another chance to bring an appeal. It means Assange, who has been in prison or the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012, will not be put on a plane in the short term. The U.S. charged Assange with helping U.S. Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning in obtaining around classified or sensitive documents, about 750,000 pieces of it, in one of the largest leaks of state secrets in U.S. history. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul, the linkage here of the bond market into the equity success. I mean, I look at the lift in equities, and I think I want a 10-year real yield of 2.05, 2.04, dare I say 1.99, a lower inflation-adjusted yield. I don't have that. I'm at 2.09%. It's moved, but it really hasn't moved like a great bull market.
No, I mean, again, just looking at the yield curve here, you got the 2-year 4.82%.
I don't even look at it anymore. Do you look at it?
Yeah, I got it on my screen, and I keep seeing this inverted yield curve with the the 10s at. I mean, my 2 years at 4.82 and my 10 years at 4.41. Cam Harvey at Duke, he told me that's going to lead to a recession. I haven't seen any recession.
Yeah,
so I don't know what's going on. I mean,
I have trouble, with the crutch of it. I just, it's like we're coming into the end of the. It's like I don't look at the yield curve anymore, and the Red Sox are 9.5 back.
Oh, well,
I mean,
Yankees
there's a correlation there.
The Yankees just don't lose. That is murderer's row out there and up in the Bronx here, and they're getting some good pitching, and that's all you
God
need.
for the Chicago White Sox.
Exactly. Thank goodness for the Chicago White Sox. That is some brutal baseball that they play.
This Miami trade where they traded to the Padres, they traded their star to the Padres. I think that's something to come, where the teams, are going to be trading earlier in the season. Because
you hit the nail on the head. A lot of teams are going to be starting trading earlier.
Yeah,
it's May, dude.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, it's like, but you get to form your team quicker so you can get that stretch down the road. And I get it. It's like, heck, it's May. We just got.
Do you want to weigh in on the yield curve as well?
No, the Tigers are 500 ball.
The Tigers are inverted.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael Barr, for that bond analysis. Futures up 9, Dow futures up 30. Just a lift to the market. What can I say? And of course, into the key NVIDIA report. Carol and Tim with that. Look for that here in a few days. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are in the green. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%. Dow futures are little changed at 40,174. S&P futures up 0.1% at 5,337. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.82%, little change. The yield on the 10-year at 4.42%, and that is little changed. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher at $2,422 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $83 a barrel. WTI crude $79 a barrel. What's moving the markets? Johnson Controls International up 5%. Bloomberg reported that Elliott Investment Management has built up a large position in the company. And then we have news from AstraZeneca, the company investing $1.5 billion in a manufacturing site in Singapore. And finally, Tesla. Sources saying that employees are on edge. They're just waiting for that layoff email. Sources saying rolling job cuts likely to extend through at least June. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. This is important because we try to remember, the gradual efforts of strategists and the thinking there. And then there's just people that say, shut up and buy or shut up and sell. We get an update now from Shut Up and Buy, which is price up, yield down. Ian Lingen joins us, head of U.S. rate strategy at BMO Capital Markets, who looks at a 10-year here at 4.42%, nicely in. It's beginning to move as well in his direction. Ian, do you reaffirm that the 10-year yield will be substantially lower in the coming quarters?
Yes, I would say that between now and the end of the year, we will have moments where rates occasionally back up, but being long treasuries in this environment is a Fed credibility trade. And as break-evens start to decline, nominal rates will drift lower. I could easily see 10-year yields ending this year below 4%.
Nice. I'm seeing the 30-year mortgage, Tom. I know you're out there thinking about the place in Paris, 7.08%.
It's come in a little bit.
It's come in a smidge.
It's come in a little bit.
It needs to come in a lot more
for me to refinance. There's the Macron Olympics asterisk next to that.
I know. Exactly. Ian, talk to us about this Federal Reserve here. I mean, there's been a lot of economic data over the past several weeks, particularly on the inflation front with PPI and CPI. You've got a little bit of hindsight here. How do you think that informs the Fed's decision over the next several meetings?
Well, I think to a large extent, the Fed remains decidedly in a wait-and-see mode. However, they must take a reasonable amount of solace from the fact that April's inflation data showed that Q1 might have actually been the anomaly. And as the resumption of cooler inflation continues, I think that puts the Fed on track to cut twice this year. But the question is, when is the departure point? Do they go in July? Do they go in September? And that's going to come down to the performance of inflation over the course of the next couple months.
On this yield curve here, Tom and I were just chatting about it earlier. It's still inverted, 40 basis points or so. I'm going to have to ask this question. I've been asking it for a couple of years. Do we care? Should we care?
You're all inversion this morning.
I am.
I mean, Ian, Paul Sweeney's got 2 10s on the brain.
So I do think that we care as an economy. I think we care from the perspective of what the Fed thinks about an inverted yield curve. And the other observation that I would make is if we had a steeper curve and Fed funds were where they are now, 550, then that means that we would probably be looking in the mid 5.75, 6% range for 10-year yields. And what does that imply for equities and risk assets and mortgage rates, for that matter? I think that the Fed, to some extent, has been a bit frustrated by the inversion of the curve because it eases financial conditions more than it would have otherwise.
One of the splashes over the weekend, Ian Lingen, was Ed Yardeni, who joined us last week, folks. Ed Yardeni reaffirmed a roaring 20s bull market perspective. I'm not going to go to the math right now, but he's got a confidence in an up 7%, kind of SPX here for a good number of years. And that dovetails right over, Ian Lingen, into your colleague Brian Belsky's enthusiasm for equity markets. How do you correlate your call on the 10-year price up, yield down into the equity market, into the stock market?
Well, I think it's very supportive both of Brian's call, as well as a broader constructive outlook on stocks, because if you have lower borrowing costs, if you have a Fed that's normalizing policy rates lower, that's going to be a net positive for equity valuations. And it, for all intents and purposes, is doubling down on the no landing / soft landing narrative, which has been supportive.
So that's like I can make my first trade out of the triple leveraged all cash fund. And Dr. Linga's giving me permission, Paul, to do that.
Exactly.
Slide out.
Exactly.
Just one share.
Hey, Ian, again, we're talking just at the 10-year, which I think is where a lot of people like to kind of focus their attention, 4.42% here. Is this kind of a trading range, 4 to 4.5%? Is that kind of what you're seeing? Is that what your trading desk is telling you?
Well, I think that we could get back to 465, but not 475, and we could get down to, let's call it 425 or 420. But until we actually have the Fed in motion, it'll be very difficult for us to break out of this trading range until we have confirmation that Powell's on the move.
How concerned are you and your economics team that, that maybe the Fed is too late here, that maybe they should be cutting rates already, particularly if you look at some of the real-time inflation data?
I don't think that the Fed is behind the curve on normalization yet. I suspect that they need more confirmation on the inflation front, and so does the market. We could very well find ourselves with the current quarter looking not dissimilar from Q1, depending on how the next 2 months play out. So
but the
caution makes sense.
The heart of the matter is every central bank is ex post. They're going to wait to see the data, all the cliches, data dependence and that. The market's not ex post. Is the market discounting now, and will it into the quarters of this summer, the months of this summer, will it get out front of an ex post Fed?
I think that what we're seeing in the market at the moment is a shift in the focus of the dual mandate from inflation back to jobs. And we haven't seen weakness on the jobs front, but not the strength that we had become accustomed to. And that transition means, to your point, Tom, that the market is going to get in front of the next move. And that is ultimately going to be constructive for treasuries, and to the earlier observation, constructive for equities as well.
Yeah, Ian Lingan there. It's great. Belsky, they're going to do a co-write. Brian Belsky, Ian Lingan, Brian Belsky on the world that BMO sees. Ian Lingan, thank you so much for just. I'm sorry, it's a huge call, and as you said, for all of our listeners and viewers, it folds right into everything we do, from car loans to mortgages. Does it bring auto insurance down? I don't think anything could do that.
No, I mean, and we saw that pullback just a little bit in the CPI data last period, auto, but I don't know what happened to that auto loan insurance market. I was so crazy there for 6 to 12 months.
Should we bring Lisa Mateo in?
Sure.
Are you guys aware? I mean, we had the owl in Central Park, and now we have the turkey on Roosevelt Island. There's this ginormous turkey that was in Manhattan, and for those of you who don't move the map, you move east. He's trying to get to Brooklyn just to hang out.
Where's he trying to go?
The turkey wanted to go over with David Gura and do In the Swamp 2024, and it only made it halfway there. It's in the East River and Roosevelt Island. The beast is ginormous. I mean, it's like, it's got to be a 20-pound turkey. I mean,
where did it come from? Yeah, where did it come from?
Oh, they're around. No,
oh, yeah?
They come down. There's coyotes in Central Park.
Oh, yeah.
Rare. I don't want to,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, we have to watch Vet Bill and Kennel Fee all the time. I mean, they're lunch for the wildlife of Central Park. But, I mean, the owl died. Yep. And it's really sad. I mean, and there's great photographers. Good Morning Manhattan Bird Alert. There's like serious people with serious optics.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great photos of the ducks and all that. And all of a sudden, the beast is there. And the thing, that kind of thing. And it's over in Roosevelt Island, I think. We should do a remote
Island.
talk to. It's Astoria.
Well, we can take the little tram. We just walk outside, take the tram over.
Right here.
Yeah.
That's right where we go.
It's Astoria is the name
So
of it.
Roosevelt, I know Staten Island was stocked with turkeys.
Yeah.
They have an issue with them.
Tomorrow on YouTube, Ari will have images of Astoria. We'll do it again for you tomorrow. Futures up 7. I'm sorry, there's a bid to the market on a Monday morning.
Yeah, go figure. We'll see it here. It's got the S&P up about 7 points here. The NASDAQ up 36 points. We'll see here. Your VIX, Tom, I'm quoting the VIX. 12.2. Just kind of hanging here.
He drank the Kool-Aid, except it's not Kool-Aid here. It's Tang. The Senka is very good this morning, too. Thank you. This is just wonderful Senka.
Well, more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen. NASDAQ futures up 0.2%. Dow futures, they're a little changed right now, but after hitting the 40,000 mark on Friday, right now we're at 40,165. S&P futures up about 0.1%. To the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.83%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.43%, and that's up 1 basis point. The economic calendar pretty quiet today. Later this week, the Fed reports minutes from its April-May policy meeting. And speaking of which, a sign that J.P. Morgan seeing a benefit from higher interest rates from the Fed. The firm raised its forecast for net interest income for this year from about $90 billion to $91 billion. Shares up nearly 1% right now. And Google making a move to zero in on Microsoft's customers. Bloomberg reporting the company released a white paper. They highlighted its rivals' security lapses. Now it's also offering government corporate clients discounts to ditch Office for its software. We have Alphabet up about 0.3%. That is your your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
And Lisa, thanks so much. Always good to hear from presidents, governors, vice chairmen, hangers-on, Michelle Smith, everybody else at the Fed. They all weigh in. But Michael McKee today with a gentleman from Atlanta here, Raphael Bostic, on inflation.
Anything can happen. My outlook is really that inflation will continue to fall through this year and into 2025. I think that it will take quite a while for us to get all the way to 2%, but I do think we'll get there.
So there's a parlor game of the gentleman from Atlanta, Raphael Bostic. Joining us now, Michael McKee, with some perspective here as well. Mike, I want to talk about the end of your wonderful interview with Mr. Bostic, where they went to what I talk about all the time, which are the two or the three Americas. This is a kid who came out of southern New Jersey, Delran, pretty tough, with a Caribbean background and all. Went to Harvard. He was valedictorian at Delran, New Jersey. Went to Harvard, excelled there. Ended up at Stanford with a thesis, essays on urban growth and development. And I thought he was eloquent there on the disaggregation of America. Is Raphael Bostic, Michael McKee, a future chairman of the Fed?
Oh, I would not presume to give you an answer to that. First of all, as he would say, we have a chair, and it doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. When his term is up, we'll have to see. It'll depend on who's in the White House, and it'll depend on what the particular candidates want to do. But he's certainly got, as you mentioned, the resume for it. He's got the resume, his prodigious monetary chops. I mean, it's not like Clarida and DSGE, or maybe the political economy of Adam Posen at the Peterson Institute, the absolute rigor of Olivier Blanchard in his textbooks. But what kind of person is Raphael Bostic when he talks about inflation, about getting to June 12th? Well, he goes beyond even his talk on monetary policy. He's sort of a Renaissance man, very interested in a lot of different things. And so he probably would be good at just about anything, any kind of leadership post that you put him into. He does have some deep thinking on the economy. He has a doctorate, and he is very well informed on all of this. So, you have to say that Bostic is fairly impressive. Now, the Fed has changed in recent years. It's not as much built around economics. Jay Powell's not an economist, and there are a number of people now on the board who are not. But we'll see come 2026 what the next direction is going to be.
So, Tom, we know Michael's ensconced at the Ritz-Carlton Amelia Island. That's probably, that's kind of where he goes. But listen, Mike, if you get off property, I got a place for you to go. The Surf Restaurant and Bar right on the beach. Use my name. They'll take care of you up there. I know the Ritz-Carlton's he's got a lot of good options there as well. Michael, what did Mr. Bostic say about, the businesses, the small businesses, the consumer in his region of the United States?
Well, he said what he's hearing is that the economy is slowing, but only very slowly, and that inflation has been bumpy. It's going down, but only very slowly. And so people are going to have to put up with the economy the way it is for some time. I tried to get him in a way to talk about the election without mentioning the word election, because then the Fed speakers all go into the, it won't bother us, we'll do what we need to do speak. But I asked him whether the people would feel a change in the economy over the next 6 months. And he said he didn't know, that they might not, that this might be the status quo for a while. And so that has political implications as well as monetary policy implications.
Right. Mike, what's the path here to June 12th? Lay out for our audience here. We're staggering into Memorial Day weekend when the Red Sox will go under 10 games out because the Yankees aren't going to lose before the 4th of July. Michael McKee, give us your economic date calendar to June 12th.
Well, the next thing we look for is at the end of May, the PCE inflation numbers, and all of those people who are inflation nerds and have looked at it and the contributions that get folded into it from CPI and PPI say it's going to come in a little cooler than anticipated, and that might be good news for inflation watchers. But the question is, does it come down enough that it starts to give the Fed quote unquote, more confidence. Then we have CPI on the 12th of June, the same day as the Fed meeting. Now, the very beginning of the month of June, we will have the May payrolls report, but that'll be less important unless there's some big surprise there than the two inflation numbers. So that's what you're going to watch. And then next Saturday, Tom, I will be at Fenway Park, so we will do our Red Sox check-in. That's very good.
Absolutely. I hate we're going to go here with McKee right now, but Mike, I'm looking at Paul's got me on Amelia Island, the Ritz-Carlton.
Yes.
Did you get up this morning, Mike, with the sunrise and do the horseback through the water thing, like on the website?
I got up this morning with the sunrise, but I was not near any horses.
You were dashing through the waves. Can you imagine what that costs?
How does McKee, he's an economist, how does he get to Amelia Island?
Oh, yeah,
he's everywhere.
It's like Lucas Shaw.
Yeah, these guys are
stars.
I mean,
Lucas is it, how do you say it? Can? Lisa, help me here. Can? And then he's like, I guess I'll go to Paris.
Yep.
And then I go to London to hobnob with the entertainment. Michael McKee, thank you so much.
Pulling duty.
Brilliant, an important interview with Mr. Bostic of Atlanta. I really can't say enough about the final questions.
At 2 o'clock today, Michael McKee is speaking with Loretta Mester of the Cleveland Fed. So he's just
hobnobbing.
I did not know
this.
He's hobnobbing.
And this is perfect, folks. Thank you, Paul. This is absolutely perfect to show you how unique the Central Bank Institution of America is. Loretta Mester is a hard-nosed mathematician. She's arguably the quickest, smartest, sharpest at the desk. And Raphael Bostic comes from broader, bulletproof PhD economics with psychology.
Stanford, yeah.
And then Mary Daly out in San Francisco is her own stew. I mean, it's just, I can't say enough about the eclectic mix.
And we boil it all down to a bunch of dots.
Yeah, also we boil it down to our economic indicators, led by Michael McKee. Our economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, grow where you grow, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. And we thank Commonwealth for really supporting all of our economics that we do here every day. I love I'm sorry, Paul, I'm on this disaggregation feel. I don't know how you can aggregate the American economy. I see the struggle in New York City and frankly across this nation of so many people. The haves are going, I mean, people are almost benumbed. People that are in the game, they got to be benumbed when they look this weekend at their 401k. I mean, Tucker used to have a 201k, and he's out at a 501k now.
Exactly, he's large
like
there. Yep, he's drinking wine out of a bottle. No more boxes for him. But they talk about that.
It's a bottle, but it's got the weave around it.
Yeah, it's got.
Remember Matus in college? What are you laughing about, Lisa? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
if you wanted to impress her, you went with Matus. You didn't go with MD 2020, right?
No, she went to Rutgers. She was a scholar at Rutgers.
Yeah.
She wasn't playing around.
Okay.
Boone's Farm.
She didn't get. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Boone's Farm as well. Futures up 5, Dow futures up 12. He knows every cold duck with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, has died. Raisi was a hardline protege of the country's supreme leader. Raisi, along with Iran's foreign minister and other officials, were killed in a helicopter crash in northwestern Iran. Bloomberg's Roz Matheson says there were no signs of foul play.
The crash happened in terrible weather conditions. There was very, very strong fog. It's now also turned to snow and mud, which has made the rescue effort initially very difficult. It took them many hours just to reach the crash site, but it does seem like weather really played a part in this crash. And as we know, 9 people were on the helicopter and were killed, including President Raisi, the foreign minister, some senior local officials, Raisi's security chief, and also obviously the pilot and crew.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. Today marks the start of week 6 of former President Donald Trump's first criminal trial centered on alleged hush money payments. The prosecution's last witness, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, will face further cross-examination. Sean Diddy Combs admitted Sunday that he beat his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway in 2016 after CNN released video of the attack, saying in a video apology he was truly sorry.
My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
The music mogul, who cannot be charged over the attack, said he takes full responsibility for his actions. The CNN video shows Combs wearing only a white towel, punching and kicking Ventura. The footage also shows Combs shoving and dragging her and throwing a vase in her direction. Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, in his inaugural speech, urged China to stop its military intimidation against Taiwan. Lai was sworn into office in a ceremony today after he won an election earlier this year. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers, they charge dollar margin loan rates from 5.83% to 6.83% rates, subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. A firestorm out on YouTube. Live chat, disaggregation of the economy, no. Foreign exchange, Euroed, no. How about Boone's Farm ain't too shabby, and Pistols Pete says go with the Mad Dog. That's the biggest response we've gotten. We thank Lisa Mateo for channeling the zeitgeist here. I mean, Lisa, help me here. Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, or do you go Fuzzy Navel?
No, Strawberry Hill.
Or do you go Blue Hawaiian?
You got to go Strawberry Hill. It's the classic.
And what happened to Black Label?
Yeah.
Mabel,
Yeah.
Black Label. I missed that beer. That was good.
When you're a fossil enough, you remember I remember the first Captain Crunch.
Yeah. Oh,
and my
yeah.
sisters having a complete tantrum.
They didn't even have
over
the
that.
strawberry stuff in
we
it.
had
It was just
Cheerios and
Captain
Trix.
Crunch,
It's
yeah.
Captain
And
Crunch.
it ripped the upper mouth and all the other stuff.
I
Yeah.
hate to say that I believe I remember the first Boone's Farm. It was a fine beverage. And you can still get it, I guess.
You can.
It's
Twist
a
sauce.
fruit-based wine. Thank you, Lisa Mateo, for the biggest response we've got on YouTube live chat today. Coming up, we'll talk monetary economics. You can comment on that on YouTube as well. I'm sorry, Raphael Bostic inspires me. These stories, Paul, of how these people wandered through academics, each of them different.
No, they come from all different places. There you go. Push the blue button.
Detroit Lion blue button.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. In Delran, New Jersey. It's kind of like in South Jersey, just a little bit northeast of Philadelphia.
Yeah, northeast Philadelphia.
Yeah, so it's kind of in that area there. So, but then to make his way to Harvard and then Stanford, such a great success story, as we see, all over the place.
Right.
So wonderful.
It's good. It's good to see. We welcome all of you on Apple CarPlay, on Android, the Bloomberg Business app. It's free. On YouTube, search Bloomberg Podcasts. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Bloomberg Surveillance.
headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Wall Street set to open near record highs after the Dow hit 40,000 for the first time on Friday. Right now, the Dow at 40,140. We have NASDAQ futures at 18,648. They're little change. The S&P futures, the level at 5,330. To the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.84%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.45%, and that's up 3 basis points. On the economic calendar this week, the Federal Reserve reports on minutes of its April-May policy meeting. And meanwhile, this morning, we had more Fedspeak. Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic, you heard it right here, Bloomberg's Michael McKee, that he still sees just one rate cut before the end of the year. We have some tough news from Europe's largest low-cost carrier, talking about Ryanair. ADRs down about 0.5%. The company said airfares over the peak summer season would be lower than expected. And Airbus, their ADRs up 0.5%, secured an order for 105 narrow-body jets from Saudi Arabia's flagship carrier. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
I'm glad. Thank you, Lisa. I'm so glad you did this. I'm sorry. Let's talk about this. Airplane flight is cheaper. It's not a lot cheaper, but I'm looking at flights. I don't fly anywhere. I have no life, but I have no life. But the horde is flying. Vet Bill is thinking of running over to Ireland for some dog show. But the answer is it's cheaper. I mean, it's like, is that deflation? I think so.
I guess so. I can't imagine. I mean, but I just go by you, Tom. What the first class to New York to Paris? What's
it's
that
like
running?
3,100, and it used to be well over 7,500.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And it's like a whole new game. We got to get. Make a note, Rich. We got to get some of the sell side airline people on, or our great people, George, and the rest as well.
Every plane I go in is packed, so I'm not sure what he's.
Futures up 9. They pulled back a little bit. Futures up 4. We had Jumana Bachechi on from Dubai.
Yep.
With her perspective, just decades of perspective, wrapped around the Levant. And now Ariel Cohen joins. Dr. Cohen is with the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center, but it is a pedigree, including Council on Foreign Relations, that is just jaw-dropping. I love what you say, Ariel Cohen. You say the United States is dithering. Iran doesn't have that luxury this morning. What will be the action of the theocracy in Iran?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. The fascinating things for me is that there's a power struggle going on, not just for the presidency. Raisi was supposed to be out next week. He was term limited. But the power struggle is for the number one job, is for the supreme leader job. And Ayatollah Khamenei wants his boy, his son, in that job. Yeah. Why? Because he's his son. He's not a big cleric. He, doesn't have the longest beard there. And Raisi, an ally of Khamenei, was in the running. He was trying to get the job won. And now, conveniently, he is eliminated. He's out. So that's one thing I'm looking at. The other thing I'm looking at is that under Raisi, who, by the way, failed to get elected the last time he ran, President Rouhani, a more moderate guy, was president for 4 years before him. Under Raisi, Iran consolidated its position as a regional leader. It got much closer to Russia. It has this huge drone deal that they produce drones for Russia. Who thought a while ago that the Soviet Union or Russia would be buying sophisticated weapons from Iran? So he moved Iran into this new world with China, with Russia, and he wanted to get closer to Saudi Arabia. The Chinese brokered deal between Saudi and Iran. This was all under Raisi's guidance and on his watch. Also coordinating all the Iranian proxies against Israel, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas. So he was playing regional politics, and he was playing it hard. And we were asleep at the switch.
Ariel Cohen, and I've asked this of Golnar Montavani, our wonderful reporter on this. Let me ask it of you. If you go south from Tehran down to Isfahan, and the beauty of Isfahan and the distance there from Tehran, does the theocracy still have the support of the Iranian people?
This is a million dirham question. Theocracy does have support of people in small towns, of less educated people. But if you go into the cities, and especially in Tehran, and look at educated people, they either stay there and hate theocracy, or they get the heck out of there. A lot of doctors, scientists, engineers are out of that country. Why? Because they're being suffocated. The Iranian economy is mismanaged. I have friends who visited Iran recently, and they report poverty and collapse of services, and people are having a very hard time while this regime is playing global politics, not unlike the Soviet regime that we remember, people of our generation, how the Soviet Communist Party was running the USSR into the ground while the USSR was playing global politics.
Dr. Cohen, let's have Paul Sweeney jump in here. He wants to shift the gears a bit.
All right, so Dr. Cohen, let's step back here, and with this news that's taken place in Iran over the weekend, what's the latest political, military calculus coming out of the Middle East today? It just seems like we're just grinding this out week after week, month after month.
Yes, and what Iran achieved, I would say, its proxy Hamas, its proxy Hezbollah, has the U.S. ally Israel on its back foot. U.S., as I said, is dithering in terms of support of Israel, support of Saudi Arabia. Since the Obama administration, folks in Washington thought that we can change the balance of power in the Middle East and Iran will behave in a responsible fashion. Well, I don't see that. I see stronger proxies from the Red Sea to Lebanon. I see strongly anti-American policies and an alliance with Russia and China.
Ariel, with the time we've got left, this is really, really important. President Biden has a belief of this concept, Israel. Is that a dated belief? Is he talking, as an older guy from a time 20, 30 years ago? Or can that belief continue out to 2030?
When you say belief in Israel, what do you mean by that?
The American belief, the American projection politically to Israel, is it broken?
I think it's broken in the younger generation along the two coasts. It's not broken. I mean, you look at data, 70+% of Americans support Israel. And Israel is a nation. It's not U.S. belief or U.S. doesn't believe. It's a nation with a thriving economy and nuclear weapons. But in terms of U.S. alliance, the U.S. alliance was regional. It wasn't just Israel. It's Saudi Arabia. It's Israel, it's Egypt, and other countries. But U.S. needs to be steadfast. In terms of Biden versus the younger generation, I think it's the elite opinion that went, for the lack of a better word, woke. It's far left. It's poisoned by applications of Marxism. I don't want to go into the whole deep analytical framework here, but we are lost in terms of how our younger generation is seeing the real world. We lost the sense of reality. We are telling ourselves stories that are not realistic, and that is dangerous, not just vis-a-vis Israel, but vis-a-vis China, Russia, and the rest of the world.
Dr. Cohen, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Ariel Cohen with us today here from the Atlantic Council. And they have Jumana Bertacci on earlier. I think we've given some perspective to this story that we see in Iran, the death of two leaders of Iran. Futures, they give way a little bit. I mean, bull market over, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. Got to rethink
futures
this
up
whole
9,
thing.
another up 2. The VIX like a rock, 12.23 as well. This is a great song. Jennifer Warren's killed it. She was the first one who did it. It was like a huge hit and all that. And then Joe Cocker just killed it. This is a Leonard Cohen song. First we take Manhattan, then we take Berlin.
But trying to change the system from within. I'm coming on, I'm coming to reward
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Surveillance. Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr stopped by as well. Control room in morning here. Knicks lost. Rangers forward and all that. Beautiful weather. Finally, it is May here. Paul, do you think it was like the coldest early spring?
And the wettest.
Since time. It was like Seattle.
And the wettest. That being said, had a good 2-3 hours on the beach yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday it finally broke, and we said good morning. We're going to get some heat here for the coming week. That's a good thing as well. Speaking of heat, NVIDIA. What is NVIDIA? I'm sorry.
Wednesday after the close, yeah.
The Carol and Tim show. They get
Carol.
I find hilarious how everyone's like saying this is like, since when is one company?
I know.
The be all.
And they report so late. Everybody else has reported. We're all past the whole thing, and this thing could move the market. We'll see.
We'll have to see. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning on YouTube, Apple CarPlay, Android on Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight. It's coming closer, June 4 to June 6th.
Oh, boy.
In Nashville, don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit Insight. Let me spell that. INSITE, insight.bnymellon.com. Making an appearance there. Is it you alone? Is Ms. Steele going?
Ms. Steele will be joining Alex Steele. We will be down there for a couple of days, broadcasting down there, meeting some of the folks down there at that conference.
Pancake Pantry, recommended.
Yep. Cracker Barrel will be there. The Grand Ole Opry will be there.
Yeah,
we'll do it all.
You see some. I can think of like a whole bunch of artists I'd love to see at the Grand Ole Opry as well. Futures up 3, Dow futures up 9. Joining us right now, George Saravelos. He's with Deutsche Bank, writing brilliant notes. I just can't say enough about what he writes on foreign exchange as well. And we're going to bring in George Saravelos, and we'll do the Bloomberg Business Flash after that. George, I look at the theme into the summer, and to me, it's a jumble. What is your coherent theme into the summer?
Good to hear your voice, Tom. Good morning. So our theme is low vol persisting. In an environment of low volatility, carry tends to do quite well. So in FX, you should see more of the same. But I think a crucial point is the dollar is a high yielding currency. And if you think about the start of the year, so many people made the argument that if equities go up, the dollar should weaken, and the dollar's strong despite equities at record highs. And that's because it's part of the carry trade. So we're positive on the dollar, and we're positive on carry as well.
Are the correlations in place across equities, bonds, currencies, and commodities, like the moonshot in commodities so much? Are those correlations normal right now into the summer, George Saravelos?
Well, I would say they're very different from last year. And this is something we've been writing about for a while, because if you look at the last few years, the world was dominated by this negative supply shock. So you had low growth, high inflation. That was bad for equities, and it was bad for bonds as well. But now we're in a more normal world, so to speak, and it's all about demand. Do you have demand holding in? And therefore, you can have yields still high, which you do, but equity strong as well, because the demand side of the economy is proving very resilient to these high levels of central bank rates. So I would say the correlation has gone back to being a bit more normal after being a lot more abnormal over the last few years.
So, George, give us your thoughts, your perspective here with a little bit of hindsight. What's happening with the Japanese yen? What has happened over the last several weeks? And kind of what's your view here?
It's probably the most interesting currency in developed markets at the moment. I think what's happening is simple, that the Bank of Japan is just too slow. It's very dovish, which means if you look at real rates in Japan, they're minus 2%. So everyone else, even the Swiss, have positive rates with a 1 handle or above, and Japan still stands out. So even though policy is normalizing, it's normalizing from such a low base that it doesn't do anything to materially erode that carry disadvantage which the yen has. So we think as long as the Bank of Japan goes very slow, which they are, the yen will stay weak. And they're going slow because they still don't believe inflation is at 2%.
Right, exactly. So if we think about the U.S. dollar then in that context, I mean, is there any reason to think this dollar will not remain strong here versus pretty much everything else out there?
Well, I think there are two ways you can get a weak dollar. The one is if you believe in a U.S. recession and therefore a sharp Fed cutting cycle, which many people did 6 months ago, but we haven't believed in that scenario for a while. So from my perspective, even if you get a Fed cutting cycle, it's not going to be steep. The dollar's still going to be a high yielder. So that's one scenario to get a weak dollar. The other one is if you get a weak dollar policy after the US election. And what I mean by that is not just statements on the dollar, but outright policy to restrict capital inflows, for example, tax on foreigners. We don't think that's going to happen either. Instead, we think we're going to get a restrictive trade policy. So we're in the dollar stronger for longer camp.
George, fold your expertise on foreign exchange into gold to the moon. And I'm going to state as a basic idea, at the margin, central banks are buying gold. If they're buying gold, are they owning less dollars? Give us a paragraph on that.
So many people, I think, look at the relationship between gold and the dollar and say, well, gold is going up because there's flight from the dollar. People are worried about U.S. fiscal sustainability, and therefore we should more generally be worried about the dollar. I don't think that's the case at all. If you look at what's going on this year, there's two things that are doing very well, gold and the dollar at the same time. So there's someone in the market there that likes both the dollar and gold. And I would argue this is the outcome of essentially decoupling and deglobalization, where if you look at China, for example, this is very public data, you have accumulation of gold reserves on the official sector side. But on the private sector side, the private sector wants to go into dollars. So you have capital flight from China away from the local currency, which is why the yuan is so weak. And it's going both in dollars and gold at the same time.
What's your euro call, please? I mean, we've got some people talking euro weakness to parity. Where are you on that?
So we have the euro effectively doing a range that's quite similar to last year. So if you think about last year, it was around 105 to 113. I would say the risks to that range are biased lower, but basically 1 to 110 for me is a range that's quite realistic for this year.
All right, Tom and I are thinking about coming over to London. We've got the suite booked at the Ned here. How concerned should we be about this, the British pound here? What's your call there?
I wouldn't be that concerned. The pound tends to follow the dollar in general. So if the dollar is strong against the euro, it's very likely it stays cheap against, it stays expensive against the pound as well. You have to, though, think about one thing, which is the UK election coming up. It shouldn't lead to any major change in policy unless you get a tail surprise outcome, and I stress this is a tail outcome, of potentially the second party, because everyone expects Labour to be the first. If the second party that wins is the Liberal Democrats as opposed to the Conservatives, again, distant but not a non-zero probability, then you could have the market thinking of a much more pro-European stance that could help the pound. So it's a tail scenario, but it's the first time where it's a positive tail rather than a negative one.
George Saravelos, thank you so much with Deutsche Bank there. Can't say enough about the research combine they have out of London. George Saravelos working with David Folkerts at Landau. The day Putin invaded, Russia, I editorialized. The day Russia invaded Ukraine, Paul, Folkerts Landau was adamant about the stimulus to come. He was way out front on that. And I think, particularly Europe is still struggling with a comfort with austerity over what the U.S. did, which was spend it all and all the deficit dynamics that we see there. Futures up 3. We're on the edge of red and green on the screen. Yeah, yes. Moments ago, markets pulled back a little bit to red and green on the screen. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has died. He was killed in a helicopter crash along with Iran's foreign minister and other officials in northwestern Iran. Pangea Policy founder Terry Haynes says President Raisi's death raises some geopolitical risk in the Middle East.
The impact could be quite limited because in the Iranian system, what matters the most is the supreme leader first, and secondly, the proxies are generally run by the IRGC and not directly by the president.
Terry Haynes of Pangea Policy was a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance. Saudi Arabia's king is facing a health issue. More from Bloomberg's Dan Schwartzman.
Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz has been diagnosed with inflammation of the lung after suffering from a high fever and joint pain. According to the state-run Saudi press agency, the 88-year-old monarch will receive antibiotics at Al Salam Palace in Jeddah. The king was admitted to the hospital back in April and released after having a routine checkup. King Salman has been the ruler of the world's largest oil exporter since 2015, but one of his sons, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is widely believed to be running the kingdom on a day-to-day basis. Dan Schwartzman, Bloomberg Radio.
It's been nearly 2 months since the Dali cargo ship collided with the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. This morning, the vessel is finally heading back to port. They're deploying about 5 tugboats, and they will move very slowly into a marine terminal in the port of Baltimore. Last week, a series of controlled explosions broke up pieces of the bridge that were pinning the ship down. The ship's crew of 21 people have been remaining on board since the crash that killed 6 construction workers on the bridge. The criminal hush money trial of Donald Trump is starting to wind down in Manhattan. However, a judge is now saying this morning that closing arguments won't take place until a week from Tuesday. Judge Juan Merchan says, unfortunately, the calendar is what it is regarding the Memorial Day holiday. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Can't say enough about the Bloomberg newsletters. You know, they brought them out like a year or 2 years ago. Yeah. And Lucas Shaw is just brilliant on all the Hollywood chit-chat, really focused on Paramount, what's going to happen there. And Mark Gurman this week put out this lengthy note on Apple. And, you know, this sort of they're behind on AI and all this. And there's a single sentence, Paul, quote, and there's concern that users will shrug at the new Apple features and not even bother using them. What? Does Michael Barr want AI?
AI? I don't. That means all in to me. That's it.
Say,
I'm playing poker. That's all I'm thinking.
Is he even following up on this whole AI
This is
thing?
a huge question. Do we want this stuff?
I don't know. And that's, you know, when I was up talking to this Boston consulting group, folks up in Boston, they were saying when they talk to their clients about implementing AI, they have to make sure their clients know how to do it ethically, you know, because this thing can get ugly very quickly with some of this technology, and it's just it's what you don't know that's going to potentially be an issue.
The news organizations, including Bloomberg, are sort of wrapped up in, okay, what's this mean for us and all that. But I just, you know, I get is it Chat GPT?
Yeah, you're
Did
on
I say
it.
that
You're
right?
on it. Yep.
I get that because I've got a family member who's knee deep in this in the computing world, and he says it's revolutionary. But does Michael Barr want AI to tell him how bad the Detroit Tigers are?
No, because knuckleheads are going to knuckle, and you don't want that out there, man.
This is going to be a huge theme into the summer, no question about that. From New York, not on AI, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, we're mixed. We've got red and green on the screen, but set to open at new record highs right now. The NASDAQ at 18,655. We have Dow futures, the Dow at 40,134, and S&P at 5,330. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.83%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.44%, and that's up 2 basis points. JP Morgan, they're up 0.3%. It raised its forecast for net interest income this year from about $90 billion to $91 billion. We have earnings from Norwegian Cruise. They're up more than 3%, boosted its full-year adjusted EPS forecast. After the bell, it's on to Zoom video communication, but all eyes zero in Wednesday. NVIDIA reports then Barclays actually increased its price target on the stock. Shares are up more than 1%. Other chip makers, including Micron Technology, also higher. Those shares up about 2%. And finally, the Wall Street Journal reporting Grayscale Investment CEO Michael Sonnenschein has stepped down. Goldman Sachs' Peter Mintzberg, well, he's going to take his place in August. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Really been anticipating this conversation. Joining us now from Wells Fargo with a really, really bright William and Mary take on asset allocation strategies, Tracie McMillion. Thrilled she could join us. Good morning, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Good morning, Tom.
Tracie, you know, I look at your research note and it's just completely dead on about almost the numbness I felt this weekend about this great bull market. Color the exuberance for a stock market that you see at Wells Fargo.
Yes, thanks for having me on this morning, Tom. I agree. We've seen a lot of exuberance in the market since last October, and a lot of that has been fueled by better earnings. We saw an earnings recession turn to an earnings recovery, and so that's fueled some of that exuberance. But there's also just a lot of momentum in this market right now, and that also is
Right.
fueling upturn that we're seeing.
I mean, what's really important to me is like the cab driver taking the twerp. They get off the plane and they get off the plane, Paul. They got to go to Wake Forest.
Yeah.
You know, is the cab driver or the Uber driver in your burg, are they talking about the stock market?
Probably so, and that's very reminiscent of the late 1990s, isn't it? So the difference, though, is that this time we are seeing these rises in the market supported by higher earnings, and a lot of policy has contributed to these higher stock market prices this time. So there's some fundamental justification behind some of the rises that we've seen. However, there are pockets of the market that are probably getting a little overpriced. You know, communication services has done really well this
Right.
year. Information technology has done really well. Those are areas where we'd be trimming and putting that cash into short-term fixed income and just waiting for a better opportunity.
For that big correction to
get
come in. Paul, just to be clear here, Wells Fargo's got to publish 2025 of SPX 5700.
Oh, okay.
These are not, they're in the game.
They're in the
Wells
game.
Fargo's saying you got to participate.
So, Tracie, if we do want to go into some fixed income, lock in some yield here, do I stick with the Treasury market? I mean, I can get a 4.8% for a 2-year Treasury, or do I maybe take some credit risk? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, so we're saying that in the shorter term for that cash, we would be holding short-term fixed income, and the Treasury market's a good place to do that with very little interest rate or very low credit risk, very little interest rate risk as well. And then we would supplement that with high-grade corporate credit, and we would be more concerned about investing in high yield fixed income at this point, especially since spreads have come in so much. We just don't see the risk reward value there that we do in corporate credits that are higher quality.
So, Tracie, back to the equity side here. I see a lot of spending coming out of Washington, D.C. for better or worse in, the Investment Reduction Act and so on and so forth, the CHIPS Act. Does that translate into maybe how I should invest? Should I look at some of the industries that might do well there? And if so, how are you guys thinking about it?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. We're looking at corporations sectors that would benefit from both the CHIPS Act and from the Infrastructure Act. So we like companies that are in the materials space, the industrial space, energy space, and we also like healthcare, not as much of a beneficiary of those acts as the others, but also an area of the market where we see some value.
Right. What does Jay Bryson say then about international? I mean, bring it over to asset allocation. I've known Wells Fargo to be hugely U.S. centric. Has that changed?
That really has not changed. We still have longer term overweight to U.S. relative to the global market capitalization. And right now, we also have a shorter term, more tactical positioning where we're overweight U.S. as well. And again, that's that quality theme, up in quality, U.S. large caps over small caps, and developed markets over emerging markets. We do go international.
One final question. I mean, if we go out 1 year, you're going to stagger into May, June of 2025. I can't believe I'm saying that. Does 60-40 work, Tracie McMillion?
Yes, 60-40 works out a year. In fact, we do see higher equity markets, as you pointed out, in 2025. And we also think that at these higher rates, bonds are offering very attractive opportunities for investors. So we do see 60-40 working, correlations starting to be less positive than they've been over the past couple of years, and that will have a diversification impact as well.
Tracie McMillion, thank you so much. With Wells Fargo. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Have you been there?
I've
never been.
It's a beautiful town. Wake Forest is there. I was thinking about going to Wake Forest back in the day. And when I was at Duke, we'd travel there and watch a hoop game.
Let me
easier to get tickets there.
Road trip.
Yeah. It's only about an hour from Durham.
Oh, it's only an hour.
Yeah. And it's close to Greensboro. They can fly. Charlotte's close by, so you can get good airport service.
Yeah. What'd you learn there? I mean, I don't sense... I think it's maybe because of the new distribution. Everybody doesn't have a stockbroker like they used to. Good morning, Commonwealth, with 2,000 advisors. But I just don't sense the exuberance out there about the markets. I mean, Lisa, are people talking to you about the stock market?
No.
Yeah,
and they
I just don't see it.
So when you're out buying your hamburgers, your high-priced hamburgers over the weekend, that you weren't talking stocks.
No, not at all.
How about when you're TJ Maxx?
Prices.
How about when you're TJ Maxx?
Yes, when I did my TJ Maxx haul, see,
so that was a
what
successful weekend
you're going
for
for the bargain because everybody's budget is tight.
So what did you get at TJ Maxx? Got some dresses and things like that?
I did.
And you can get like name dresses, right? Like designers.
Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger.
Yeah.
Some of them have
you figured
Gucci.
That all out.
Like it's crazy.
It's great. Redo Keeper of the Amex. Love that. You know? I mean, okay.
But you're watching your budgets, and that's what it's about.
Yep. But it's the oddest bull market. We came 2 Octobers ago. Ed Yardeni, Ralph Ankapor, shut up and buy. And then a year, October of 2023, who wanted to buy that? It was like,
that was a rough year.
It was terrible. Boom, up we go. And now what? And then, we just went through this sell in May and go away.
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
Exactly. So, I mean, we got a little bit of a mixed market here, but we'll get another earnings, I think, guidepost, if you will, Tom, Wednesday after the close with NVIDIA. I mean, we used to think that was just a chip stock, but now it's kind of a little bit of a bellwether for tech spending overall. And it's become, we saw last year, kind of a little bit of a bellwether for the overall equity markets because now every company out there is trying to get you to buy in on some AI angle for their business. But NVIDIA seems to be kind of ground zero for that.
Pro tip, into the weekend. I mean, into Monday afternoon, I should say. It'll be Tuesday morning in Japan. All I know is I got Euro-Yen 169.63 rounded up to a 170. That's strong Euro, weak Yen. And, a number of our guests have said, well, maybe it's not that big a deal. I'm like, okay, maybe it is. Coming up, an important interview. Our Anne-Marie Horton in conversation with Senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, and from Alabama, Senator Katie Britt as well. We'll do that here in about 25 minutes. Red and green on the screen. Had green earlier. We pulled back a little bit into a mix. Red and green on the screen. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Search Bloomberg Podcasts. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, will Wall Street continue last week's momentum? The Dow reached a milestone on Friday, closing above 40,000 for the first time ever. NVIDIA also opens its books on Wednesday. It's driven a major chunk of the S&P 500 gains in 2024 and comprises 5% of its market value. All right, let's see how things are shaping up on this new trading week. We'll start with the S&P 500. Right now, shares are little changes at 5,304. We have the Dow. That's little change as well at 39,979. And the NASDAQ still little change at 16,701. Over to the bond market, we have the 2-year yield at 4.83%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.44%. And that's up 2 basis points. To commodities, metals on the move. We'll start with spot gold right now. That's higher at $2,417 an ounce. And we have copper hit a fresh high. Bets that a shortage is coming. And finally, Brent crude at $83 a barrel. At the open, we're checking in with JP Morgan. They're up about 0.3%. It lifted its forecast amount for the net interest income it expects to generate this year. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much. Our theme this morning has sort of been like, okay, Dow 40,000. Ed Yardeni out with a note, basically a linear extrapolation out 4, 5, even 6 years of good feelings. And it's like to define the exuberance of the moment. In the absolute trenches of this is Eric Balchunas, our ETF analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, but far more just attuned to the exuberances, the enthusiasms that are out there. I've never seen a bull market like this. Yeah. People are almost benumbed. Why?
Yeah, we actually called it comfortably bullish. That was, you could use the word numb. I'm thinking comfortably numb, but that was our term at the beginning of the year for the flows, because there was a shock here and there, but the flows just went through it. So I think it will take something very serious to get investors to get out of this market, because
we need a 10% correction to get everybody to wake up, right?
Yeah, but what would cause that? That's the question. And I think
the Red Sox would be a good start, but I'm sure you got a better idea.
So when looking at the flows of the past week, the perfect thing for bullishness that you want to see is old school ETFs like SPY and the Qs at the top. The trading crowd loves them. They're number 1 and 2. And then VU is 3. That's the Vanguard bid, which is relentless. So you have the trading crowd and the buy and hold crowd buying in. So, the flows all year, besides a week or two here and there, have been largely bullish. And they've just, again, they felt this way since 2022, which was obviously a really bad year. Outside of that, they have this sort of relentless feeling, but we have this fear-greed meter, and it's not quite all the way at greed, but it's close. So we're with comfortably bullish, not exuberant quite yet, but we're getting close.
Can you just help me? Who is the ETF investor these days? Retail, institutional? Who are they?
It's everyone. That's why I love ETFs, Paul, because this is the first time in history that Bridgewater is one of the biggest owners of the Vanguard Emerging Markets Fund.
Really?
So is my mom. So you have Bridgewater and my mom in the same fund paying the same fee, Paul. It's beautiful. So, and they both benefit from each other, right? The liquidity that Bridgewater brings and that keeps the spreads low. So in a way, ETFs, in my opinion, took the institutional class of mutual funds and gave everybody the I-class pricing, and they trade on an exchange, and so they kind of marry those two. Right. So you get all kinds of investors in these things, from retail to advisors to institutions.
One more inside baseball, and then we gotta sell your book. Bitcoin up 67,000, 9% up is a new high in Bitcoin. Is the supply-demand fiction of ETFs into Bitcoin leading that rally, pushing that rally higher?
It's definitely, they're doing like a tango, the price of Bitcoin and the flows. Every time there's a little bit of outflows, I do see the price go down. But the price isn't totally dictated by the flows, because ETFs only own 4% of all Bitcoin outstanding. But if you take the float, maybe it's more like 8%, because half of Bitcoin doesn't move, right? So even at 8%, they're not the whole market. They're a minority player. That said, if you really look at the sentiment, clearly the ETF was the big narrative. So it's the narrative driving things. I've even told some of crypto Twitter, you got to move on to a new narrative, because it can't just be the ETF, because that's just a vehicle. You need an actual purpose and something else to talk about. And if you can get that narrative out there, the ETF flows should take care of themselves. But I would say, yes, Tom, the ETF flows are probably driving sentiment and price a little bit to a fault. I don't think it's healthy.
Tom, you're the two smartest people in this studio right now, Lisa Mateo and Eric Balchunas, both Rutgers graduates.
Really, he's large. The movie rights have been sold. It's the Bogle effect. How John Bogle, who I was very close with, in Vanguard turned Wall Street inside out. This is the heart of the matter. You are more qualified than anyone I know to talk about their new CEO from BlackRock. How will he greeted by the faithful?
So it's a great question. I was a little surprised. I put him in my mix of possibilities because I knew he was available. And I interviewed him for my book, The Bogle Effect. I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him. I've gotten to know him over the years. He's a true indexer guy. Like, he knows the history of indexing.
Salam Ranji's a real deal.
He is. He also can run an ETF business. So my guess is they said he can definitely run an ETF business, which is what Vanguard's big vehicle is, ETFs. And he I think he won their hearts with his indexing passion. And if you hear him on any podcast, he's always talking about like delivering better value, more access, lower cost, less friction. He is all in on this stuff. Okay. So I think that combo will sell well to the Bogleheads and the new school Vanguard people.
I'm going to say this right now. We want you and the new head of Vanguard together in studio with us for an entire half hour. That would be lights out.
That would be.
That would be like drag.
I'll work on it.
Drag his sorry butt in here.
Work with our boy back there, the boss.
Yeah, work with one of our the interns.
He can take
the intern from Rutgers or from Penn State. I can't remember.
He can take the Amtrak up with me because he's going to move to Malvern.
Yes,
that's a whole other thing. From New York to Malvern. That's
how
interesting.
Good is that? The main line.
The main line.
He's going to be in New York, so But I think you and him together.
No, he's got to move.
We let you.
They don't have an office here.
On this, but
they love having an office that's like far away. Like they like to be like not part of Wall Street.
Oh, come on, let me cut to the chase. Is Vanguard going to go Bitcoin with this evil person from BlackRock?
No, but they might take one incremental step, maybe, which is to just let the ETFs trade on their platform. But I don't see them launching an ETF. I see him making incremental changes, not wholesale changes.
How much of just the ETF market, like we started this, it was passive, triple underline passive. Now there's active. What's the mix now? Because I don't get that whole thing.
It's a whole spectrum. I'd say about 60% is true passive, bulk beta, boring. Then you got about 20% that's smart beta. I know you love that term, which is indexing where you tweak it. You know, you weight by dividends or fundamentals. And then I'd say right now about 8% is active. So it's a full spectrum from like totally Cathie Wood active to like Vanguard beta and everything in between. But I would say...
Come on, they're co-opting the mutual fund business, period.
So as a sell-side analyst, do I go up to Boston and not see Fidelity and Wellington? I go see the ETF people?
Both. The same people
Did they vote
run both.
II? Did they vote II?
Their phrase is we are vehicle agnostic.
Okay.
Which is what I would say too. So you're going to see the same people. They just run the ETF and then the mutual fund. Different wrappers.
Okay.
Paul's vehicle agnostic. He'll take Uber or Lyft. Yeah. What's the flows that you see now? Active management, traditional mutual funds.
It's bad. Yeah. So active management on the equity side, it's really bad. We're talking like over $100 billion out this year. Fixed income, not so bad.
So far in like 4.5 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
In fixed income, they've seen inflows. Bond managers kind of, they're both equally intelligent in my opinion, but bond managers have easier benchmark. The ag is very easy to beat.
Yeah.
And bonds are more complicated, I think. So for an advisor, they're like, stocks, I don't know, I'll just buy the market. There's 50 people covering Amazon. What extra information is there? I'll just go beta.
Right.
But for bonds, they're like, look, there's time. There's a million bonds on the market. There's convexity. I don't want to follow the Fed every day. I'll give it to an active manager who can beat the ag. So I think bond managers have a better case.
I didn't know that.
And that's why their flows are better.
I fully support that. What about commodities now? Can I get the orange juice ETF, the Tropicana
You are going to
ETF?
love this. There is no orange juice ETF, but there is a breakfast ETF, which has
Sanka, Tang.
No, it has coffee, orange juice. I think pork bellies.
Yes.
What am I missing? Lean hogs.
Well, it's like the Pharaoh.
It's like the Denny's Grand Slam.
It's like in English, you got to have an all English breakfast. I mean,
The Denny's Grand Slam and an ETF wrapper.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's called BFast. If you're interested, that's the ticker.
And if you leverage it, you have it at Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, but orange juice is a little too narrow. They've tried every now and then they step out and they try something.
What about copper?
There is a copper ETF. So I'd say for all the commodities, maybe half of them have an ETF. But there's a couple that are just too small, and there's not enough of a market, so they wrap them up.
We got to run. Eric, this has been brilliant. I'm serious about the new CEO of Vanguard. To have you and him together would be a huge value add for our audience.
I'm on it.
And we'll do that. Rich, we'll do that across 2 blocks. I mean, Bill Shunis doesn't deserve 2 blocks, but, you know, he wrote the book on Vanguard.
Take the train up together. There they go.
We'll make it happen. Quickly here with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Closing arguments have now been pushed back in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial in Manhattan. Judge Juan Marchand says it will take place a week from Tuesday. Marchand said this morning, unfortunately, the calendar is what it is regarding the Memorial Day holiday. Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, is expected to retake the stand. Iran's supreme leader has announced 5 days of mourning for President Ibrahim Raisi. This after Raisi was killed in a helicopter crash in a mountainous region in the northwest part of the country. Bloomberg's Roz Matheson has more.
It does seem like this was just a terrible accident. There's no hint of foul play so far, although Israel did protectively come out and publicly say it had no hand in this, but no one's really suggesting that. For now, it does seem these were older helicopters, possibly not maintained properly. That might be an effect of US sanctions also, but military choppers tend to be inherently dangerous.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. President Joe Biden spoke at a campaign event in Detroit last night, addressing 5,000 members of the NAACP.
Investing more money than ever in black families and communities. We deliver checks to deposit in people's pockets to reduce black child poverty. We're reconnecting black neighborhoods cut off by old highways and decades of disinvestment, including here in Detroit.
Earlier Sunday, President Biden made an appeal to black voters in a commencement address at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Red and green on the screen, down a little bit negative here, but NASDAQ up 0.3%,
Yep.
Paul.
Yeah.
I guess out front of NVIDIA.
Yeah, NVIDIA, you know, after the, I mean, just you think back, Tom, 18 months ago, and they came out with that revenue guidance that just blew everybody away, and it just made people like me say, oh, I guess this AI thing is real.
Fractionally higher yield structure as well, dollar stronger as well. Let me frame out the interview. We're going to have Anne-Marie Horton here in conversation together with the well-known senator from Texas, a Republican, Mr. Ted Cruz, and maybe less well-known, Katie Britt, Senator Britt of Alabama. Some of you will know Senator Britt from her response in the State of the Union address on March 7th to President Biden. She made a splash there, some controversy, I should say, as well. I believe the theme here with Senators Cruz and Britt will be of abortion. Anne-Marie Horton will bring this to us here in a few moments. We're looking forward to that, and to have Senator Cruz and Senator Britt, Republicans from Texas and Alabama, will be interesting. This is just I thought Ezra Klein was brilliant this weekend in framing out the Biden position now on 6, 7, 8 things. And one of the allusions was basically the issue of abortion is something that they're going to continue to stress with Vice President Harris.
Yeah, I think we saw that as an issue for the Democrats' favor, if you will, in the midterm elections. That was certainly a big issue, so something that will likely be a big issue here in the general election coming up here. So again, a good opportunity to hear from 2 leading Republican senators.
Of course, what's interesting here is the economics under it, and of course the complexities of Alabama and Texas as well. But without question, part of this is the boom economies that we see, the migration in America from selected states as a general statement down south to the New South, which of course makes up Alabama, I should say. I should mention Arkansas and French Hill as well. Thank you to Congressman Hill for joining us the other day. But Alabama, I should say, and Texas with a all-in economic vibrancy versus other parts of the country. Much more going on. I know Ed Ludlow lined up, I believe, later today with Michael Dell of Texas.
Wow.
As well. We're looking forward to that conversation this morning. Right now, to give you a little bit of help on the data, the levels here on the Dow, 39,917, just under the 40,000 level. SPX has green on the screen fractionally, 5311. And now Anne Marie Horton with the Senators of Texas and Alabama.
You're out with a joint op-ed this morning in the Wall Street Journal. The title of it will protect both life and IVF. You're announcing a bill today through this legislation that would require as a condition, your words, of receiving federal Medicaid funding that states don't prohibit IVF. Now, concerns about IVF stemmed really, Senator Britt, from your state of Alabama.
Absolutely.
The Supreme Court came out, they said that these embryos in IVF, they are considered children under the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. And then the Alabama legislator moved to pass a bill that would protect IVF. So why is a national bill needed if the legislator just acted on behalf of basically telling the Supreme Court in Alabama that's wrong and this is not where the American people are?
Unfortunately, we've seen a number of people try to fearmonger on this very issue. And so Ted and I came together, and we believe this effort should be bipartisan to make sure that every parent across the country who wants to bring life into this world and maybe struggling with infertility or others, but wants to use IVF to create the miracle of life, bring it into the world, has a certainty that that's going to be available to them. And so we're excited about it and believe that it's something we can move forward quickly.
Senator Cruz, then why wouldn't Republicans sign up for Senator Duckworth's bill earlier this year, which then actually would have protected what happened in Alabama?
Well, because that bill's a very different bill. That bill really seeks to backdoor in broader abortion legislation, which is where the Democrats are, but that's not IVF. Our bill is very simple and it's very focused, and it is designed to protect IVF. IVF is miraculous medical technology. It enables millions of parents to have children, to be moms, to be dads. 2% of live births in America right now today come from IVF. It's incredible. And both Katie and I agree that IVF is incredibly pro-family, that we should be standing and helping parents who want to raise kids. And what happened when the Alabama Supreme Court decision came out, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of misunderstanding, and people did not want anything to threaten IVF. I agree with that. Katie agrees with that. And so we came together and said, let's draft a simple, straightforward federal bill that creates a federal right, that you as a parent have a right to have access to IVF. If you want to have a child and you need medical assistance to do so, that should be your right. This is a bill, I think, that should be overwhelmingly bipartisan. The Senate should pass this bill 100-0. We'll see if they do or not, but on the merits, that's what should happen.
Senator Duckworth's bill, though, talked about and clearly asserts that this is about, quote, assisted reproductive technology and insurers' ability to cover those procedures. So in that case, do you guys think you can get a bipartisan legislation? Why not just work with Senator Duckworth?
Well, it depends. The way the Duckworth bill is written, it's very broad. There's a reason that no Republicans supported it, because it was ostensibly about IVF, but when it was written to give the federal government authority over abortion, potentially to strike down laws governing abortion in states all across the country. And that, I get that's the Democrats' agenda. And unfortunately...
Well, why not have bipartisanship on both? Because overwhelmingly, Americans want IVF, but overwhelmingly, and you come from states that have very restrictive abortion policies, even majority of Republicans think abortion should be able to happen, rape, incest, and life of the mother. That's not true of both your states.
Well, listen, abortion is an issue that there are sharp disagreements. People of good faith and good morals disagree. And it's why the Supreme Court has said this is a question for the states, and every state decides it differently. And if you look at our Constitution, that's the way we decide really difficult issues of public policy, is we leave it to the voters, and that reflects and respects democracy. IVF is very different. Nearly 90% of Americans believe IVF should be protected. And so what we're trying to say is, look, let's find an area of common ground. We're not going to find complete agreement among all 100 senators on abortion. We're just not. People have different views. That's the beauty of a democracy, that we can have different views. But on IVF, we ought to be able to unify everybody. We ought to be able to get Republicans and Democrats together and say this technology, enabling people to be parents, is wonderful technology, and it is pro-family. So There are issues on which we disagree, but this is one where we can find common ground. I very much hope.
And I hope so too. I mean, we actually wrote this in that way so that it would be very measured and simple and to the point, protecting IVF, protecting families' ability to bring life into this world. And we both have talked to a number of friends and family members and others, constituents, that tell us their story about being able to bring a child into this world through IVF. And so making sure that we protect that in a way that protects religious freedom and liberty and families and others, I think, is critically important. And that's what we've done here, and we hope to gain some momentum on it.
I guess some of the concerns from some hard right members of your party would be, is an IVF embryo considered life at conception?
Well, look, I can tell you that there is unanimity. I believe all 100 senators support IVF. I don't know a single senator that does not. I don't know a single Republican that does not. I don't know a single Democrat that does not. We ought to be able to find real agreement on a question like IVF. You know, you talk about it, as Katie mentioned, she and I both have dear friends who had their children through IVF, and they're wonderful parents. They love their daughters, their sons. That's an amazing thing. You know, you look at, since the development of IVF, there have been over 8 million babies born through IVF. That is a fantastic thing, and so many families have been brought joy that we ought to be able to find agreement, and I think we will. I hope we will.
But in the discussion of IVF, abortion comes up, and majority of Americans are on the side of at least abortion should be allowed, especially in certain cases of rape, incest, life of the mother. So with that in mind, going into this election season, how do you think about abortion? Because that, for Democrats, is going to be one of the main rallying cries to get voters out, as well as tapping funding.
I think it also should be for Republicans. I mean, Anne-Marie, when you say that, I think the majority of Americans also believe you should not be able to take the life of a child the moment before the child is born.
Should there be a federal ban then?
Yet we saw Democrats vote just the last Congress to be able to do that. I mean, when you talk to people, when you talk about a child in a woman's womb at 39 weeks and actually aborting that baby, the majority of Americans agree that shouldn't be able to happen on American soil. So the problem is the Democrats are trying to deflect by how extreme they are in this position, and I think we're going to keep coming back to it, and I think we're where Americans are.
But if you say the Democrats are extreme in that position, and you want to have this IVF bill, and you think Duckworth potentially was too far on the margins coming into abortion, then would you be open to a bipartisanship bill when it comes to things like rape, incest, life of the mother?
So what I would say is today's Democrat position in the Senate is incredibly extreme, what Katie just told you. Every single Democrat in the Senate supports unlimited abortion, partial birth abortion,
I
literally.
don't think that's true.
But it is true.
Abortion,
So Anne-Marie, it actually is true because they all voted for it.
They
that
did.
we had a bill last Congress that would strike down every limitation in the country and that would legalize abortion literally until the moment of birth. That is such an extreme position. 9% of Americans agree with it.
If you look at CDC data, though, there are not abortions in America.
Okay, but every Democrat supports them.
There actually are.
There are late-term abortions, and every single Democrat voted.
In extreme circumstances, though.
But every single Democrat supported it, and 91% of Americans disagree with that. The vast majority of people who consider themselves pro-choice say, listen, late-term abortion in the 39th or 40th week, that is barbaric, and that's the position of every single Democrat, which is why they don't want to talk about their position. What they want to do instead is scaremonger on IVF. They want to suggest those mean Republicans want to take away IVF. Well, let's have an area of complete agreement. Let's make clear IVF is fully protected by federal law. And
I think Democrats agree with you on there. And I would push back on them who say all of them want abortion till birth.
But that is how they voted. I mean, at the end of the day, what you vote for matters.
And they did vote that way, and that's the thing. I just had the Secretary of HHS in front of us at an appropriations hearing, and I asked him about this administration not putting the Hyde Amendment in their budget request, something that's been bipartisan for years, and moving that forward. And that I had actually talked to a woman who performed one of these abortions at 39 weeks right before walking into there. She told me about how barbaric that is, about delivering the baby breech, about putting a knife up that baby's spine, opening it up, pulling out the brains, collapsing the skull, pushing that baby out. So it actually does happen, and unfortunately every Democrat voted to continue to allow that to happen. And the thing is we have a duty to continue to talk about that. We're one of 8 countries on the entire planet that allows for that.
So are you both calling for a national ban?
Well, there is an existing law that bans federal partial birth abortion. It's the Democrats that are calling for changing the federal law to legalize partial birth abortion. They voted for striking down every restriction. But understand here, listen, we're not going to this morning resolve all the disagreements on abortion. People have very strong, good faith views from places of deep emotion and personal experience. That's part of the beauty of democracy, that's part of the genius of the framers, is they recognize when there's questions we have disagreements about, let the voters decide, and you would expect the state of New York to have a different resolution than the state of Texas or the state of Alabama, and we've got 50 states. But what we can do is say, are there issues where we have agreement? And IVF is one of them. This bill is designed to protect something that is incredibly important, to give comfort to parents and to those who desperately want to be parents, who are scared and they're picking up the newspapers or watching on TV politicians saying someone's going to take away IVF. Well, this bill will make clear, it will be enshrined in federal law, you have a right to access to this technology.
It's also very political going to election. And actually, one of your staffers said that to the Washington Examiner. And as we head into the election, Senator Britt, I have to ask you, since you're with us, your name continuously be floated as this potential VP pick for former President Donald Trump. What is the current dialogue between you and the Trump campaign?
Look, I am working diligently on behalf of the people of Alabama in the United States Senate. We have a lot of work to do there, and I'm eager to continue that work, and I'm proud to be a part of it. There's no doubt that the American people want Donald Trump back in the White House. I mean, we are seeing that at every single poll because people want a secure border, they want safe streets, they want stable prices, and then that's what he's going to bring to the White House. So I'm going to continue to work diligently alongside Ted to bring common sense solutions to the problems facing our country, and certainly honored to be able to do that.
But if he calls, you accept?
Listen, I am sure he has a long list, many of which are our colleagues, and we're rooting for them for sure. Bottom line is we're going to all do everything that we can to get Donald Trump back in the White House and also take back the Senate, because the fate of our nation is at stake, and we believe that that's worth fighting for.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Katie Britt of Alabama, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.
Anne-Marie Horton in conversation with the senators from Texas and Alabama. Debate there on their legislation now, and also one of the key issues moving to the first Tuesday of November as well. We will pull it back to the markets right now. NVIDIA on Wednesday, and with that, I guess, Paul, Friday was somnolent until it wasn't.
Yep.
Moonshot.
Yep.
330 straight up, closing above 40,000. Right now, the Dow trading 40,002. But a little green on the NASDAQ. Look at Paul, explain this. The NASDAQ up 0.6%.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, a little bit of move here for these tech names. I mean, I think Alex Steele, she said it best to me last week that, this is a market that just wants to go up. I mean, you can put it in the context of we probably have a Fed that on the balance is going to be easing going forward, maybe not as much or as quick as we wanted. You've got that. And then on the other hand, we've got a pretty solid earnings outlook. So you put those two together and where do you go from there?
We've had some time here on a Monday. This is very important, and it's, of course, an issue for New York, but maybe for the rest of the nation if it proves successful. Joining us now, our surveillance congestion tax correspondent, John Tucker.
When did I get this title?
Is that reflected in your compensation, John?
We get ever nearer. I said to my driver this morning, the Bentley was in the garage, so I took Uber, and Gershon said, I said, what will the FDR and the Upper West Side Highway look like as you loop around the island of Manhattan trying to figure out how not to pay $15? Sir, do you have any wisdom on this morning?
No, I'm still trying to figure it out. It's just like, I'm going to take a boat, I think.
When is this tax, the John Tucker tax?
It's supposed to be the end of June, but again, it's in court, so who knows? I still can't get a legitimate answer to my question. How many can you just get charged once when you come in the middle of the night, like me?
And I think that's the answer,
talked to some qualified individuals who suggest it'll be once, but I don't know. To color this, folks, for those of you worldwide, nation, quickly here, John Tucker, seriously. You're in the Helix, which is a spinning around traffic jam in New Jersey. You go into tunnels, which are romance from our childhood. They're packed and backed up with cars. When you come out of the tunnel into Manhattan, is it boom, $15?
Yeah, there's a overhead reader, license plate reader, easy pass detector that you hit right as you get out of the tunnel.
So even if you're getting on the West Side Highway, you're still going
that's for the Port Authority tolls, and then you go up the street a little on Dyer Avenue, and there's another toll reader there. So it's just like they have them all over the place. The infrastructure is in place.
The infrastructure's in place.
I don't know if you can come out of a Port Authority facility, Lincoln Tunnel or the Holland Tunnel, and head right for the West Side Highway.
Right.
That you can
As
avoid.
Mohammed Al-Arian has said, it's some of the unknown unknowns from our surveillance congestion tax correspondent.
It won't be known until a week after you start getting charged.
There's 47 pieces of litigation in place, and you'll be expert on all 47. It's a bleak and dark day here. Red and green on the screen. NASDAQ rocketing up 0.6%. Highlight of my day is Alex Steele standing in our hermetically sealed studio saying, why is he still on? You could just see her with that evil look like, why is he here? We're here because we're taking you right up to the top of the hour. We do that on Bloomberg. We're on Apple CarPlay. We're on Android. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Search for Bloomberg Podcasts. We're produced by Richard Truman, Kenneth Fellio, our global technical director. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.